You woke up today with that pain that won't go away. That pain that seems to live in your body and your mind at the same time. The pain that you have already tried to ignore, fight, medicate. But do you know what Buddhist monks discovered many centuries ago? That fighting against pain only makes it stronger. When you stop fighting and simply allow it to be there, observing it like you would observe a cloud passing through the sky, something magical happens. Your pain begins to dissolve. In this video, you will learn the ancient Buddhist practices that transform suffering into wisdom and pain into peace. Therefore, prepare yourself now for a deep night. Find a comfortable place. Turn off your phone. Turn off the lights and let this video be your companion while you sleep. Allow these ancient practices to work on your body and your mind while you rest. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Have you ever noticed how your relationship with pain changes depending on how you respond to it? One moment you might be completely overwhelmed by discomfort, and in another, the same sensation seems more manageable. This fascinating phenomenon is at the heart of what mindfulness meditation offers for transforming our experience of pain. For thousands of years, Buddhist practitioners have been developing techniques that don't necessarily eliminate pain but fundamentally change our relationship with it. Mindfulness meditation serves as the cornerstone for transforming pain by teaching us to observe sensations without automatically reacting to them. When pain arises, our natural tendency is to immediately resist it, creating a secondary layer of suffering beyond the initial discomfort. Through regular mindfulness practice, we learn to create a small but significant space between the pain sensation and our response to it. This space becomes the foundation for all transformation. What makes mindfulness particularly effective for working with pain is its ability to help us separate the different components of our pain experience. When we experience pain, what we actually feel is a complex mixture of pure physical sensations combined with our emotional reactions, judgments, and stories about those sensations. Mindfulness helps us recognize that the raw sensory experience of pain is often more bearable than the additional layers of fear, resistance, and catastrophizing we add to it. Neuroscientific research has provided fascinating insights into how mindfulness changes our experience of pain. Studies conducted at major universities have shown that experienced mindfulness practitioners display altered brain activity in areas related to pain perception. These practitioners don't necessarily feel less initial sensation, but the brain regions responsible for the emotional processing of pain show reduced activity. In practical terms, this means they feel the sensation without the additional suffering that typically comes with it. The practice involves developing a non-judgmental awareness that transforms our relationship with painful experiences, rather than categorizing sensations as good or bad. We learn to observe them with curious attention, noting their intensity, location, quality, and how they change from moment to moment. This shift from evaluation to investigation creates a profound difference in how we experience discomfort. One specific mindfulness technique that helps create a healthy distance from pain is the practice of noting and naming. When experiencing pain, we simply acknowledge it internally with phrases like pain arising, pain present, or pain changing. This simple act of labeling helps prevent the mind from elaborating with stories like "this pain is unbearable" or "this will never end," which intensify suffering. The attitude of curiosity and acceptance cultivated in mindfulness makes a more peaceful relationship possible, even with intensely unpleasant sensations. This doesn't mean passive resignation to pain, but rather an active, engaged presence that allows us to respond skillfully rather than react habitually. When we stop fighting against the reality of pain that's already present, we free up enormous amounts of energy that can be directed toward healing or finding appropriate solutions. Regular mindfulness practice builds what we might call attentional muscle, the ability to direct and maintain attention even in challenging circumstances. This skill proves invaluable during intense pain episodes when our attention typically narrows and fixates on discomfort. With practice, we can broaden our awareness to include the entire body, the breath, or even sounds in the environment, preventing pain from completely dominating our experience. The mindfulness approach to pain differs significantly from many conventional approaches. Rather than immediately trying to distract from or suppress pain, mindfulness invites us to turn toward our experience with kind attention. This counterintuitive move often reveals something surprising. Resistance to pain often causes more suffering than the direct experience itself. When we stop fighting what's already here, a natural ease emerges. For those living with chronic pain, mindfulness offers particularly valuable tools. The practice helps break the cycle of physical pain leading to emotional distress, which creates tension, which then amplifies the original pain. By interrupting this cascade at various points, mindfulness can prevent the escalation that turns manageable discomfort into suffering. Long-term practitioners often report that while their physical condition hasn't changed, their relationship with pain has transformed dramatically. Implementing mindfulness for pain doesn't require hours of formal meditation. Even brief practices throughout the day can create significant shifts. Beginning with 3 to 5 minutes of mindful breathing several times daily builds the foundation. When pain arises, taking just 30 seconds to acknowledge it without resistance can prevent the habitual spiral of tension and distress. Gradually, these small moments of mindful awareness extend into longer periods and become more accessible even during challenging times. Body awareness forms a crucial component of mindfulness for pain transformation. Many of us habitually disconnect from our bodies when experiencing discomfort, creating tension patterns that actually amplify pain. Gentle practices like the body scan meditation help rebuild a healthy relationship with physical sensations. By systematically bringing attention to different body parts, we learn to stay present with all sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, without immediately trying to change them. The benefits of mindfulness for pain extend beyond the moments of acute discomfort. Regular practitioners often report improvements in sleep quality, reduced anxiety, and enhanced overall well-being, all factors that significantly impact how we experience pain. The practice creates a positive cycle where better pain management leads to improved mood, which further supports our ability to work skillfully with discomfort. Ultimately, mindfulness doesn't promise a pain-free life. Such a promise would contradict the Buddha's first noble truth that acknowledges suffering as an inevitable part of human experience. What mindfulness does offer is a radical shift in our relationship with pain. Through dedicated practice, we discover that even amidst physical or emotional discomfort, we can access a deeper dimension of peace and freedom that remains unharmed by changing sensations. Compassion, karuna, as an antidote for emotional suffering. We all know what it feels like when emotional pain takes hold, the heaviness in the chest, the mental fog, the feeling of being trapped in our suffering with no way out. In those moments, our natural tendency is often to isolate ourselves or try to push the pain away. Yet for over 2,000 years, Buddhist wisdom has offered a counterintuitive approach to emotional suffering, turning toward it with compassion. This practice of karuna, or compassionate engagement with suffering, represents one of Buddhism's most powerful contributions to our understanding of emotional healing. Compassion in Buddhism functions as a transformative force that dissolves the isolation often associated with deep emotional pain. Unlike pity, which maintains distance between the observer and the sufferer, Buddhist compassion recognizes our fundamental interconnectedness. When we experience emotional pain, we're participating in a universal human experience, one that creates the possibility for profound connection rather than isolation. The practice becomes particularly powerful when directed toward ourselves during difficult moments. Many of us find it easier to extend compassion to others while treating ourselves harshly when we struggle. Buddhist compassion training deliberately cultivates self-directed kindness, recognizing that healing begins with our relationship to our own suffering. This isn't self-indulgence or self-pity, but a wise and mature recognition that all beings, including ourselves, deserve care when in pain. When we direct compassion toward ourselves during challenging emotional states, we activate physiological systems of self-care and safety. Research has shown that self-compassion practices reduce the production of stress hormones like cortisol while increasing oxytocin and other neurochemicals associated with feelings of security and connection. The body literally shifts from a threat response state to a care response state, creating optimal conditions for emotional healing. Formal compassion meditations involve specific phrases, visualizations, and an intentionality that gradually reorganizes negative mental patterns. Traditional practices begin by imagining someone who easily evokes our care and extending good wishes toward them. Gradually, we expand this circle of compassion to include ourselves, neutral persons, difficult people, and ultimately all beings experiencing similar suffering. This systematic approach helps overcome the barriers we often place around our compassion. The phrases used in these practices are simple but profound. May I be free from suffering. May I find peace. May I treat this pain with kindness. When repeated with sincere intention during moments of emotional distress, these phrases help redirect the mind from its habitual patterns of self-criticism or rumination. Over time, these compassionate responses become more automatic, replacing the destructive thought patterns that typically accompany emotional pain. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new neural connections, makes the regular practice of compassion particularly effective for transforming emotional suffering. Studies using brain imaging technology have demonstrated that consistent compassion practice literally rewires the brain, strengthening neural circuits associated with emotional well-being. What begins as a deliberate practice gradually becomes an integrated aspect of how we naturally respond to difficulty. Buddhist compassion training develops the capacity to remain present with difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them. Many of us swing between emotional suppression and being flooded by feelings. Compassion offers a middle path, acknowledging the reality of our pain while holding it within a larger space of awareness and care. This balance allows emotions to move through us naturally without becoming stuck or overwhelming. One particularly powerful aspect of Buddhist compassion practice is its recognition of our common humanity. When experiencing emotional pain, we often fall into thinking, "Why me?" or "No one understands this." Compassion practice deliberately counters this isolation by recognizing that millions of others are experiencing similar struggles at this very moment. This shift in perspective doesn't diminish our personal experience, but places it within a context that feels less lonely and overwhelming. The practice extends beyond formal meditation sessions into daily life situations. When emotions like anger, fear, or sadness arise during interactions or challenging circumstances, we can pause and silently offer compassion to ourselves before responding. This creates a crucial moment of freedom where we're no longer completely identified with the emotion but can hold it with awareness and care. From this compassionate space, wiser choices naturally emerge. For those struggling with deep emotional wounds from past trauma or loss, Buddhist compassion practice offers a graduated approach that honors the intensity of their experience. Beginning with small moments of manageable discomfort helps build the capacity to eventually work with more challenging emotions. The practice never forces engagement with overwhelming material, but gradually builds the internal resources needed for healing at a sustainable pace. What makes Buddhist compassion particularly effective for emotional suffering is that it addresses both the content of our pain and our relationship to that pain. Many therapeutic approaches focus primarily on changing thought patterns or understanding the origins of our suffering. While these are valuable, Compassion practice directly transforms how we hold and relate to whatever emotions are present, creating immediate shifts in our experience regardless of the specific content. Compassion practice also cultivates an important quality that Buddhists call fierce compassion, the courage to set healthy boundaries and take decisive action when needed. This aspect of compassion is often misunderstood in Western contexts. True compassion isn't passive acceptance of harmful situations, but includes the wisdom to recognize when change is necessary and the courage to act accordingly. For those whose emotional suffering stems from relationships or environments that aren't serving them, fierce compassion provides both the discernment and strength needed for meaningful change. The effectiveness of compassion for emotional healing stems partly from its ability to address the self-perpetuating nature of emotional suffering. When we experience painful emotions without compassion, we often add layers of secondary suffering: shame about our anxiety, anger about our sadness, fear about our fear. Compassion interrupts this escalation by creating a different relationship with the initial emotion, preventing the cascade of reactivity that amplifies our distress. Buddhist compassion training recognizes that emotional healing isn't simply about feeling better in the moment, but about fundamentally transforming our relationship with all emotional states. Through consistent practice, we develop the capacity to meet whatever arises in our experience with an open heart. This doesn't mean we never feel pain, but that we hold our pain in a way that allows for movement, growth, and the possibility of genuine healing. Buddhist compassion training recognizes that emotional healing isn't simply about feeling better in the moment, but about fundamentally transforming our relationship with all emotional states. Through consistent practice, we develop the capacity to meet whatever arises in our experience with an open heart. This doesn't mean we never feel pain, but that we hold our pain in a way that allows for movement, growth, and the possibility of genuine healing. Understanding impermanence, anicca, to free yourself from suffering, while compassion helps us hold our pain with kindness. Another fundamental Buddhist teaching offers a complementary perspective that can profoundly transform how we experience suffering. This is the principle of impermanence, or anicca in Pali. It's a simple truth that everything changes, yet deeply understanding this reality can dramatically alter our relationship with pain and suffering. Impermanence is perhaps the most immediately verifiable of all Buddhist teachings. Just look around, nothing stays the same. Seasons change, relationships evolve, our bodies age, technologies become obsolete, and even our thoughts and emotions constantly shift. Yet despite overwhelming evidence of change in our daily lives, we often operate as if certain things, particularly unpleasant experiences, will remain fixed and permanent. The Buddha taught that this disconnect between reality, constant change, and our expectation, permanence, creates tremendous suffering. When pain arises, whether physical discomfort or emotional distress, we tend to solidify it in our minds, treating it as a fixed entity rather than a fluid process. I am in pain becomes an identity rather than an observation of a changing phenomenon. This mental solidification actually intensifies our suffering by removing the natural space and movement that exists in all experiences. Contemplating impermanence deeply doesn't just give us intellectual knowledge that pain will eventually end, it fundamentally shifts how we perceive the pain that's happening right now. When we pay close attention to even the most intense discomfort, we begin to notice that what seemed like a solid, unchanging block of pain is actually a complex flow of sensations that pulse, fluctuate, and transform moment by moment. This direct recognition creates immediate relief by dissolving the perception of solidity that makes pain feel so overwhelming. Our resistance to impermanence constitutes a fundamental cause of emotional suffering according to Buddhist psychology. We want pleasant experiences to last forever and unpleasant ones never to occur. When reality inevitably fails to meet these impossible demands, we experience frustration, disappointment, and grief beyond what the situation itself might warrant. By aligning our expectations with the truth of impermanence, we remove this additional layer of suffering. Vipassana meditation trains practitioners to observe the arising and passing away of all phenomena, including pain, developing experiential wisdom about its transitory nature. This isn't just a theoretical understanding, but a direct perception. When you sit in meditation for extended periods, physical discomfort inevitably arises. Instead of immediately shifting position, experienced meditators use this as an opportunity to investigate the changing nature of the sensation. They discover that what seems like knee pain is actually a complex constellation of pressure, warmth, tingling, and other sensations that constantly change in intensity and quality. This direct observation reveals something surprising. It's not pain itself that's unbearable, but our relationship to it. When we fight against pain, catastrophize about it, or identify with it as mine, suffering intensifies. When we observe it with equanimity as a changing process, the experience transforms. The physical sensations might remain, but our relationship to them shifts dramatically. Recognizing impermanence doesn't mean passive acceptance of harmful situations. In fact, it enables more fluid and less rigid responses to pain. When we're not caught in perceiving pain as a solid, fixed reality, we can intervene more wisely. Sometimes this means seeking appropriate treatment. Other times it means changing our relationship to the sensation through mindfulness practices. Understanding impermanence gives us more options, not fewer. The wisdom of impermanence extends beyond physical pain to emotional suffering as well. During intense grief, heartbreak, or anxiety, the mind often projects these feelings infinitely into the future. I'll always feel this way. This thought alone can create despair beyond the original emotional pain. Recognizing that all emotions, no matter how intense, are subject to change provides essential perspective during difficult times. Just as joy doesn't last forever, neither does sorrow. Buddhist teachers often suggest a simple practice during emotional turmoil, mentally noting changing. This gentle reminder helps prevent the mind from solidifying an emotional state into something more permanent than it actually is. With consistent practice, we develop what might be called emotional fluidity, the capacity to experience feelings fully while recognizing their inherently transient nature. The impermanence teaching also reveals how our attempts to freeze pleasant experiences actually diminish our enjoyment of them. When we grasp at positive states, trying to hold on to them beyond their natural duration, we create subtle tension that interferes with the very pleasure we're trying to preserve. By accepting the changing nature of pleasant experiences too, we can appreciate them more fully while they're present. Modern neuroscience confirms what Buddhist practitioners have known for centuries, that even seemingly stable pain sensations fluctuate significantly when observed closely. Brain imaging studies show that pain perception involves complex neural networks that constantly change in activation patterns. When we learn to observe these fluctuations rather than mentally solidifying them, our subjective experience of suffering can dramatically decrease even when the sensory input remains the same. For those with chronic conditions, the impermanence teaching offers a particularly valuable perspective. Even with ongoing health challenges, no moment of experience is exactly like the previous one. Pain levels fluctuate, mental states change, and moments of relative ease come and go. By training attention to notice these natural variations rather than focusing exclusively on discomfort, patients often report significant improvements in quality of life even when their underlying condition remains. The beauty of working with impermanence lies in its immediate accessibility. You don't need special equipment, perfect health, or ideal life circumstances to benefit from this perspective. In any moment, regardless of what's happening, you can observe the changing nature of your experience. This practice gradually erodes the mental patterns that transform inevitable pain into optional suffering. Understanding impermanence deeply also impacts how we approach healing itself. Rather than seeing recovery as a fixed destination we must reach, we recognize it as an unfolding process with its own natural rhythm of progress and setbacks. This perspective helps us work with the reality of our situation instead of fighting against it, creating conditions where healing can occur more organically. Conscious breathing, anapanasati, as an anchor. During pain, while understanding impermanence helps us see the changing nature of pain, we also need practical tools to remain steady and present when discomfort arises. This is where conscious breathing, or anapanasati in Pali, becomes invaluable. The Buddha taught this practice as one of the most direct and effective ways to work with challenging body and mind states, making it particularly relevant for transforming our experience of pain. Anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing, represents one of the foundational practices taught by the Buddha for working directly with challenging bodily and mental states. The word itself reveals its importance. Ana means inhalation, pana means exhalation, and sati means mindfulness or awareness. The practice involves bringing conscious awareness to the natural process of breathing, using this awareness as an anchor during difficult experiences. The breath functions as a remarkable bridge between body and mind, giving us access to physiological processes that normally operate automatically and often intensify pain. When we experience discomfort, the body typically responds with muscle tension, shallow breathing, and activation of the fight or flight response, all of which can amplify the original sensation. By consciously connecting with the breath, we can interrupt this automatic cycle and introduce a calming influence precisely when we need it most. Through conscious breathing, we can directly affect the sympathetic nervous system, reducing the production of stress hormones that amplify painful sensations. Research has shown that even 3 minutes of deep, slow breathing can significantly reduce the perceived intensity of pain. This isn't merely distraction, but an actual physiological shift that creates more favorable conditions for working with discomfort. The practice is beautifully simple, yet profoundly effective. You bring attention to the natural sensation of breathing wherever you feel it most clearly, perhaps at the nostrils, chest, or abdomen. There's no need to control or manipulate the breath. Simply observe its natural rhythm. When pain or difficult emotions arise, you acknowledge their presence while maintaining the breath as your primary focus. The breath becomes a safe harbor, a place to rest attention when other sensations become overwhelming. When focusing on the breath during episodes of acute pain, we create an attentional safe harbor that prevents catastrophizing and rumination, which frequently accompany suffering. Our minds tend to amplify pain through stories about what it means, how long it will last, or whether we can handle it. The breath gives us somewhere else to place our attention, not as an escape, but as a stable reference point from which we can relate to pain more skillfully. Regular practice of anapanasati develops a familiarity with the natural flow of breathing that remains accessible even in moments of intense pain. This is crucial because many coping strategies fall apart precisely when we need them most. Complex visualization techniques or elaborate mental exercises can become impossible during severe pain episodes. The breath, however, is always with us, a simple, immediate resource available in any circumstance. The Buddha taught specific instructions for working with painful sensations through breath awareness. When experiencing physical discomfort, he suggested acknowledging breathing in, I know there is pain in my body. Breathing out, I know there is pain in my body. This acknowledgement without elaboration helps prevent the mind from adding layers of distress to the original sensation. We're not trying to make the pain go away, but to change our relationship with it. One particularly effective approach involves imagining breathing directly into the area of discomfort. With each inhalation, visualize the breath moving into the painful region, bringing space, oxygen, and ease. With each exhalation, imagine tension and discomfort flowing out. This technique helps counter the common tendency to tighten around pain, which typically intensifies the sensation. By mentally directing breath to painful areas, we introduce movement and space where there was constriction. The breath also helps us work with the emotional components of pain. Physical discomfort rarely exists in isolation. It typically comes with emotional reactions like fear, frustration, or despair. By anchoring attention in the breath, we can acknowledge these emotions without becoming completely identified with them. Breathing in, I feel frustration. Breathing out, I hold this frustration with kindness. This simple practice prevents emotional escalation that often amplifies suffering. Regular breathing practice builds concentration that proves invaluable during painful experiences. Most of us have scattered attention that jumps from thought to thought, sensation to sensation, when pain arises. This untrained mind tends to either fixate obsessively on the discomfort or frantically try to escape it, both approaches that typically increase suffering. Through consistent breath practice, we develop the ability to keep our attention where we place it, even amidst distractions and discomfort. Beyond its immediate benefits for pain management, conscious breathing also helps us recognize how our mental states and physical sensations influence each other. We might notice that when the mind is agitated, the breath becomes shallow and rapid, and pain feels more intense. Conversely, when the breath is deep and smooth, the mind tends to settle, and our perception of discomfort often shifts. This observation gives us a practical entry point for working with the mind-body connection. Conscious breathing can be practiced anywhere, anytime, sitting in meditation, lying in bed, waiting in a doctor's office, or during daily activities. This accessibility makes it particularly valuable for those dealing with chronic pain or recurring emotional distress. Even short periods of practice throughout the day can create significant shifts in our relationship with discomfort. The effectiveness of breath awareness for pain transformation has been recognized beyond Buddhist traditions. Medical institutions now incorporate breathwork into pain management programs, and research continues to validate its benefits. Studies have shown that regular breath-focused practices can reduce pain perception, decrease medication usage, and improve quality of life for people with various chronic conditions. Perhaps most importantly, conscious breathing helps us develop a more compassionate relationship with our bodies, especially during times of pain. Many of us tend to become adversarial toward the body when it hurts, mentally separating from it, or even developing resentment toward the painful area. The breath gently brings us back into relationship with the body as a whole, reminding us that even amid discomfort, the body continues its remarkable process of breathing, sustaining life moment by moment. By learning to stay present with the breath during minor discomforts in daily life, we build the capacity to remain present during more significant challenges. Each time we respond to a small pain by connecting with the breath rather than immediately trying to escape the sensation, we strengthen our ability to work skillfully with all types of suffering. In this way, everyday experiences become opportunities for practice, preparing us for life's inevitable bigger challenges. By learning to stay present with the breath during minor discomforts in daily life, we build the capacity to remain present during more significant challenges. Each time we respond to a small pain by connecting with the breath rather than immediately trying to escape the sensation, we strengthen our ability to work skillfully with all types of suffering. In this way, everyday experiences become opportunities for practice, preparing us for life's inevitable bigger challenges. The Four Noble Truths as a model for transforming suffering. The practical approaches we've explored so far, mindfulness meditation, compassion practice, understanding impermanence, and conscious breathing, all fit within a larger framework that the Buddha offered over 2,600 years ago. This framework, known as the Four Noble Truths, provides a comprehensive map for understanding, diagnosing, and treating all forms of human suffering, including both physical and emotional pain. It's remarkably similar to how a good doctor approaches illness, identifying the problem, determining its cause, establishing whether recovery is possible, and prescribing a treatment plan. The first noble truth invites us to a radical honesty about suffering that's often missing in our pain-averse culture. It asks us to acknowledge that discomfort, dissatisfaction, and difficulty are unavoidable aspects of human experience. This might sound depressing initially, but most people find it profoundly liberating. Rather than expecting a pain-free existence and then feeling that something has gone terribly wrong when we encounter suffering, we recognize pain as a natural part of life. This truth encourages a balanced approach that neither denies nor exaggerates our pain, both tendencies that can intensify suffering. When working with physical pain, the first noble truth helps us avoid both extremes of stoically pretending we're fine when we're not, and catastrophizing minor discomforts into major crises. It creates space for a simple acknowledgement. Yes, this hurts. This honest recognition is often the first step toward a healthier relationship with pain. With emotional suffering, it similarly allows us to admit our struggles without shame or unnecessary amplification. Yes, I feel sad right now. Or, yes, I'm experiencing anxiety becomes a straightforward observation rather than a problem to fix or a failure to overcome. The second noble truth identifies the cause of suffering by distinguishing between pain, an inevitable part of life, and suffering, the additional distress we create through our relationship with pain. According to the Buddha, the root causes that transform inevitable pain into avoidable suffering are craving and aversion, our habitual tendencies to grasp at pleasant experiences and push away unpleasant ones. When physical pain arises, our aversion typically manifests as tension, resistance, anger, and desperate attempts to escape the sensation. With emotional pain, we might try to numb ourselves, distract with unhealthy behaviors, or suppress feelings, all strategies that ultimately intensify suffering. This insight about the cause of suffering is particularly valuable for chronic pain conditions where the primary pain stimulus cannot be eliminated. Even when physical sensations persist, we can work with the secondary suffering created by our resistance. Research supports this approach, showing that acceptance-based interventions often produce better outcomes than pain reduction strategies alone for chronic conditions. The second noble truth helps us locate the aspects of our suffering that we actually have control over, even when we can't control the initial pain. The third noble truth presents a radical possibility. Liberation from suffering is achievable, even when pain persists. This isn't magical thinking, but a practical recognition based on the Buddha's analysis of suffering's causes. If suffering arises from our relationship with pain rather than pain itself, then transforming that relationship can liberate us from suffering even when sensations remain. This truth offers tremendous hope, particularly for those with conditions that modern medicine cannot fully resolve. It suggests that while pain might be inevitable, our additional suffering, the mental anguish, emotional distress, and identity constriction that often accompany pain, can be dissolved. Numerous accounts from both ancient Buddhist practitioners and contemporary pain patients support this possibility. People report experiencing intense physical sensations while remaining mentally clear and emotionally stable. Pain is present, but suffering has dramatically decreased. This doesn't mean becoming numb or disconnected, but rather developing a spacious awareness that can hold pain without being overwhelmed by it. The third noble truth reminds us that our capacity for inner freedom is greater than we might have imagined. The fourth noble truth provides the practical path to this liberation, offering a comprehensive approach with 8 aspects that work together to transform our relationship with suffering. These 8 aspects address 3 crucial dimensions of human experience: ethical conduct, mental development, and wisdom cultivation. Unlike many approaches that focus exclusively on symptom reduction, the Eightfold Path recognizes that how we live, how we train our minds, and how we understand reality all contribute to our experience of suffering and its potential dissolution. The ethical components of the path, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, might seem unrelated to pain management at first glance. However, they directly address sources of emotional distress that often accompany and amplify physical pain. Living ethically reduces regret, guilt, and interpersonal conflict, all significant sources of suffering that can make physical pain much harder to bear. The mental training aspects, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, develop specific skills for working directly with painful physical and mental states, as we've explored in previous topics. The wisdom components, right understanding and right intention, transform our fundamental relationship with pain by helping us see its true nature. This 2,600-year-old model anticipated many approaches in contemporary psychology. Cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, similarly recognizes that our interpretations of pain often cause more suffering than the sensations themselves. The Four Noble Truths framework goes further, offering a comprehensive approach that addresses not just our thoughts about pain, but our entire relationship with the full spectrum of human experience. It acknowledges the complex interconnection between physical sensations, emotions, thoughts, behaviors, and our understanding of ourselves and reality. What makes this model particularly effective is its integrated nature. Each aspect of the path supports and strengthens the others, creating what Buddhist teachers call a virtuous cycle. Ethical living supports meditation by reducing regret and restlessness. Meditation deepens wisdom by clarifying perception. Wisdom guides ethical choices by revealing the consequences of our actions. Together, they create conditions where our relationship with suffering can fundamentally transform. The Buddha compared the Four Noble Truths to discovering a path out of a dangerous forest. First, we honestly acknowledge we're lost, recognizing suffering. Next, we identify how we got lost, understanding causes. Then we spot a clearing in the distance, seeing the possibility of liberation. Finally, we follow the path that leads there, practicing the Eightfold Path. This practical approach neither denies the reality of our pain nor accepts it as unchangeable. Instead, it offers a middle way, acknowledging suffering while recognizing our capacity to transform our relationship with it. For those working with physical or emotional pain, the Four Noble Truths provide both immediate practical guidance and a long-term framework for deeper transformation. They remind us that while pain may be an inevitable part of human experience, much of our suffering comes from how we relate to that pain, and that relationship is something we can change, regardless of our circumstances. Or the practice of disidentification, observing pain without becoming pain. One of the most powerful insights from Buddhist practice is the fundamental distinction between feeling pain and becoming pain, a distinction that creates remarkable freedom even amid intense suffering. When pain arises, whether physical or emotional, our habitual tendency is to completely identify with it. I am in pain, or even, I am pain. This identification happens so automatically that we rarely question it, yet it profoundly influences how we experience discomfort. Disidentification is the practice of creating healthy space between our awareness and our pain experiences without disconnecting from them. It's not about denying pain exists or trying to escape it, but rather recognizing that pain appears within our awareness. It doesn't define or constitute our entire being. This subtle yet profound shift changes everything about our relationship with suffering. Through attentive observation, we begin to recognize that pain and suffering are composite experiences made up of physical sensations, emotions, thoughts, and impulses, none of which constitute our true essence. When physical pain arises, for instance, there might be burning sensations in the body, emotions of fear or frustration, thoughts like, "I can't handle this," and impulses to move or take medication. Traditional Buddhist practice invites us to notice each component separately rather than experiencing them as one solid, overwhelming entity called my pain. The regular practice of noting, "This is not me, this is not mine, this is not myself," in relation to pain helps dissolve the automatic identification that amplifies suffering. This isn't positive thinking or denial, but a precise recognition of how we habitually claim and identify with experiences that are actually impersonal, changing processes. When we stop taking pain so personally, seeing it as something happening to me specifically, or defining who I am, it often becomes more manageable. Specific analytical meditations from Tibetan Buddhism help deconstruct the solidified experience of pain into its components, revealing its composite and impermanent nature. These practices methodically examine, where exactly is this pain? Does it have a particular color, shape dot, or size? Does it stay exactly the same, or does it fluctuate? Is it one solid thing, or many changing sensations? This detailed investigation doesn't eliminate pain, but transforms our relationship with it by revealing its true nature. Contemplative phrases like "sensations arise and pass," "I am not these sensations," help practitioners maintain perspective during moments of intense pain. These aren't just affirmations, but tools for reinforcing the experiential insight that our awareness is distinct from the contents that appear within it. Just as the sky isn't defined by the clouds that pass through it, our fundamental awareness isn't defined by the painful experiences that temporarily appear within it. The capacity to witness pain without being dominated by it represents one of Buddhism's most significant contributions to modern psychology of suffering. Contemporary approaches like acceptance and commitment therapy recognize this principle, encouraging patients to observe painful thoughts and sensations rather than becoming fused with them. What Buddhism adds is a systematic method for cultivating this observational capacity through sustained meditation practice. Neurologically, disidentification appears to work by activating brain regions associated with observation and self-regulation, while reducing activity in areas associated with self-referential processing. Brain imaging studies show that experienced meditators maintain activity in the prefrontal cortex associated with attention and observation, while showing reduced activity in the default mode network associated with self-referential thinking when exposed to painful stimuli. In simpler terms, they feel the pain, but process it differently than non-meditators. For people experiencing chronic pain, disidentification offers a practical approach that doesn't depend on eliminating the pain sensation itself. Many pain patients report that while the physical sensation remains, their suffering dramatically decreases when they stop identifying with the pain as me or mine. One patient described it as, "The pain is still there, but it's not happening to anyone anymore." This paradoxical experience, pain existing without a sufferer, represents a profound shift in relationship to discomfort. With emotional pain, disidentification is equally transformative. When intense emotions like grief, anger, or anxiety arise, we typically become completely identified with them. "I am angry," rather than "anger is present right now." This fusion with difficult emotions amplifies their intensity and duration. By practicing gentle observation, anger is arising, we create space that allows emotions to move through us without defining or overwhelming us. The practice of disidentification becomes particularly valuable during major life challenges like serious illness, loss, or other traumas. When difficult circumstances arise, we often not only experience the immediate pain, but also create secondary suffering through identification. "I am a victim. I am damaged. I am a failure." these identity formations can persist long after the initial event, creating ongoing suffering. Disidentification allows us to experience difficult events fully while recognizing they don't define our essential nature. It's important to understand that disidentification isn't dissociation or emotional numbing. In fact, it's quite the opposite. When we're identified with pain, we often unconsciously contract around it, creating tension that actually blocks full experience. Disidentification allows a more complete, direct experience of sensations and emotions without the additional layer of me and mine that creates resistance. Many practitioners report experiencing pain more clearly while suffering less from it. Regular meditation practice develops this capacity for disidentification gradually over time. Initially, we might notice identification after it's already happened. I've been completely lost in this pain for hours. Eventually, we can catch it in the moment. I notice I'm starting to identify with this sensation. With continued practice, the habit of automatic identification weakens, and we naturally maintain perspective even during challenging experiences. This doesn't mean never experiencing pain, but rather holding pain within a larger, more spacious awareness. Practically speaking, disidentification can be cultivated through simple practices in daily life. When physical discomfort arises, we can mentally note, sensations are happening rather than I am in pain. When strong emotions surface, we might observe, sadness is present rather than I am sad. This slight linguistic shift reflects and reinforces a profound perceptual change. Over time, these small moments of practice accumulate, gradually transforming our default relationship with all experience, including pain. The freedom that comes through disidentification isn't about escaping our human experience, but engaging with it more fully and wisely. When we're not completely identified with each passing pain and pleasure, we can respond to life's challenges with greater flexibility and compassion. Instead of being driven by automatic reactions to comfort and discomfort, we can make choices based on deeper values and wisdom. This represents the practical liberation that Buddhist practice offers, not freedom from pain, but freedom within it. The freedom that comes through disidentification isn't about escaping our human experience, but engaging with it more fully and wisely. When we're not completely identified with each passing pain and pleasure, we can respond to life's challenges with greater flexibility and compassion. Instead of being driven by automatic reactions to comfort and discomfort, we can make choices based on deeper values and wisdom. This represents the practical liberation that Buddhist practice offers, not freedom from pain, but freedom within it. Body scan meditation for reconciliation with the body. While disidentification helps create a healthy relationship with our pain experience, we also need practices that directly address our physical embodiment. This is where body scan meditation becomes particularly valuable. This practice systematically directs mindful attention to each part of the body, dissolving accumulated tension and unconscious patterns of resistance to physical experience. Body scan meditation originated in Buddhist traditions of body contemplation and has become widely adopted in contemporary mindfulness programs due to its remarkable effectiveness. The practice involves methodically moving awareness through the entire body, typically beginning at the feet and gradually working upward to the head. Though variations exist, at each point, you simply notice whatever sensations are present without trying to change them. What makes this practice especially powerful for working with physical pain is its ability to restore the mind-body connection often compromised by chronic pain experiences. When we live with persistent discomfort, we typically develop the habit of disconnecting from the body, essentially trying to escape our physical experience through distraction, dissociation, or mental resistance. While understandable, this disconnection actually tends to intensify suffering over time by creating additional tension and preventing us from responding skillfully to our body's signals. As we move through the body with gentle, non-judgmental attention, We develop intimacy with physical sensations without trying to control or reject them. This approach represents a fundamental shift from our usual relationship with the body, especially areas experiencing pain. Rather than treating the body as a problem to be fixed or an enemy to be overcome, we approach it with friendly curiosity. This shift alone can significantly transform our experience of physical discomfort. The process is straightforward but profound. You might begin by bringing attention to your feet, noticing sensations of pressure where they contact the floor, perhaps temperature, tingling, or other feelings. There's no need to search for specific sensations or create them. Simply notice what's already there. If you detect no particular sensation in an area, you simply note that absence of sensation. You then gradually move your attention through the ankles, calves, knees, thighs, and so on throughout the entire body. When attention reaches areas experiencing pain, the practice becomes particularly valuable. Instead of immediately pulling away from discomfort, you're invited to gently explore it with kind attention. This doesn't mean forcing yourself to focus intensely on severe pain. That could be overwhelming. Rather, you acknowledge the painful area with a light, compassionate awareness, perhaps noticing its boundaries, quality, or how it might pulse or change. Often, you'll discover that what seemed like one solid mass of pain actually consists of various changing sensations with moments of space between them. This practice gradually dissolves what pain researchers call the body map of pain, distorted neural representations that perpetuate painful sensations even after physical healing has occurred. Through repeated, non-reactive attention to the body, we help rewire these neural patterns, creating more accurate and less distressing body maps in the brain. Numerous studies have demonstrated that regular body scan practice can lead to significant reductions in pain intensity and the emotional suffering associated with it. In cases of persistent pain, body scan meditation helps identify the crucial difference between primary pain, the unavoidable physical sensation, and secondary pain, the added tension, resistance, and aversion. Primary pain might arise from injury, illness, or other physiological causes and sometimes cannot be eliminated. Secondary pain, however, comes from our reaction to the primary sensation, tensing muscles around the painful area, catastrophizing about what it means, or becoming angry and frustrated with the discomfort. The body scan helps reveal how much of our suffering comes from this secondary response, which we can learn to modify even when the original sensation remains. Through conscious contact with all areas of the body, including painful ones, we cultivate equanimity and reduce the tendency toward internal fragmentation that often accompanies prolonged physical suffering. Many of us develop a divided relationship with our bodies during chronic pain, treating painful parts as other or as enemies to be fought against. The body scan helps reintegrate these rejected areas, developing a more unified and compassionate relationship with our physical experience. The practice also reveals how we store emotional tension in the body. You might notice, for instance, that anxiety manifests as tightness in the chest, or that unexpressed anger creates tension in the jaw or shoulders. By bringing gentle awareness to these areas, we often release emotional energy that's been physically held, sometimes for years. This emotional release can significantly reduce physical discomfort that's been maintained partly through these chronic tension patterns. For beginners, it's helpful to practice the body scan with guidance, perhaps using an audio recording that leads you through the process. Sessions typically range from 15 to 45 minutes, though even shorter practices can be beneficial. As you become familiar with the technique, you can practice independently and adapt the length to suit your circumstances. Many people find a daily practice most effective, but even 2 or 3 sessions weekly can produce meaningful benefits. While the full body scan is typically done lying down or sitting in a comfortable position, you can also incorporate mini body scans throughout your day. Taking just 30 seconds to scan from head to toe while waiting in line, sitting at your desk, or before entering a challenging situation can help release tension you didn't even realize you were carrying. These brief check-ins help maintain the body awareness developed in longer sessions. The body scan pairs particularly well with breath work. You might combine conscious breathing with the scan by imagining that you're breathing directly into each body part as you bring attention there. This can enhance the relaxation response and help direct nurturing energy to areas of discomfort. The combination of breath and body awareness creates a powerful synergy for working with pain. What many practitioners discover through regular body scanning is that the body contains wisdom that the thinking mind often misses. By returning to direct physical experience rather than being caught in thoughts about the body, we access this embodied intelligence. The body often signals what it needs, whether that's movement, period, rest, medical attention, or emotional release. But these signals can only be received when we're actually listening. For those who've experienced trauma, the body scan requires careful implementation, as bringing attention to certain body areas might initially trigger distress. In these cases, it's helpful to work with a qualified teacher who can adapt the practice appropriately, perhaps beginning with brief attention to neutral or pleasant body areas and gradually building capacity for more challenging regions. Despite these necessary precautions, body-based practices often prove especially healing for trauma survivors because they directly address the physiological patterns where trauma is held. The reconciliation with the body that develops through regular scanning practice extends far beyond formal meditation sessions. Practitioners often report a growing sense of embodied presence throughout daily activities, eating, walking, working, and relating to others. This embodied awareness helps prevent the accumulation of tension that can exacerbate pain conditions and supports more skillful responses to discomfort when it does arise. The power of radical acceptance in the Buddhist approach to pain, closely connected to body awareness practices, is the transformative power of radical acceptance. In Buddhist teachings, acceptance doesn't mean passive resignation, but a profound recognition of present reality as the necessary starting point for any genuine transformation. This practice dissolves the additional layer of suffering created by mental resistance to pain that's already present, freeing energy that's wasted in fighting against the inevitable. To understand radical acceptance, it helps to recognize what happens when we don't accept pain. When discomfort arises, whether physical sensation or emotional distress, our habitual response is resistance. We tense up physically, mentally reject the experience, and often launch into thoughts like, "This shouldn't be happening," "I can't stand this," or "This has to stop right now." This resistance creates a second layer of suffering beyond the initial pain. It's as if we're experiencing both the pain itself and the suffering of fighting against that pain. Research shows that acceptance is associated with lower pain levels, better physical functioning, and reduced emotional suffering in people with chronic conditions. One particularly striking study followed patients with chronic pain who participated in acceptance-based interventions. Those who developed greater acceptance reported significant improvements in quality of life and reduced disability, even when their baseline pain sensation remained relatively unchanged. What changed was their relationship with the pain, not necessarily the pain itself. Buddhist acceptance develops through the recognition that resisting present reality only intensifies suffering, while accepting it creates space for more skillful responses. This doesn't mean we become passive or stop taking appropriate action to address problems. Instead, acceptance acknowledges the fundamental truth that we can only effectively work with reality once we've fully recognized what that reality is. Fighting against what's already happening consumes the very energy we need for healing and wise action. A clear distinction exists between acceptance and resignation. Resignation comes from hopelessness and giving up. Acceptance, in contrast, comes from clear seeing and actually creates the conditions for positive change. When we stop expending energy fighting against what's already present, We free that energy for more constructive purposes. Paradoxically, fully accepting pain often leads to its transformation, as it interrupts the cycles of tension, fear, and catastrophizing that amplify it. The practice involves meditative phrases like, "I allow this experience to be exactly as it is," or "I make space for this pain to be present." These aren't just positive affirmations, but practical tools that help interrupt the automatic resistance response. By consciously choosing a different relationship with pain, one of allowing rather than fighting, we create an attitude of accommodation that dissolves the habitual contraction around suffering. This approach aligns with emerging understandings in pain science about how resistance affects our experience of discomfort. When we resist pain, muscles around the painful area typically tense, reducing blood flow and increasing inflammation. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood the system, heightening sensitivity to pain signals. Mentally, resistance often leads to catastrophizing, which research consistently shows amplifies pain perception. Acceptance addresses these mechanisms directly. The practice of acceptance applies equally to emotional pain. When difficult emotions arise, grief, anger, fear, shame, our tendency is to either suppress them or become overwhelmed by them. Acceptance offers a middle path, acknowledging emotions fully without being controlled by them. This might involve silently noting, "Grief is present right now, and I allow it to be here," or "I make space for this anxiety to move through me." This accepting stance helps emotions process naturally rather than becoming stuck or overwhelming. Cultivating acceptance is particularly valuable during health challenges or life crises when circumstances may be temporarily beyond our control. By accepting the reality of our situation without adding layers of resistance, we conserve precious energy and maintain clearer perception that can guide appropriate action. Even in dire circumstances, the freedom to choose our relationship with what's happening remains available, and this freedom often makes a crucial difference in our experience. The Buddhist approach to acceptance incorporates an understanding of impermanence, recognizing that accepting the present moment doesn't mean believing conditions will remain unchanged forever. Pain fluctuates, circumstances shift, and opportunities for positive change arise when we're attentive and not blinded by resistance. Acceptance keeps us grounded in current reality while remaining open to emerging possibilities. Practically speaking, developing acceptance usually begins with smaller discomforts before addressing major pain. You might practice with mild physical sensations, perhaps a slight itch or the feeling of sitting in an uncomfortable chair, noticing your automatic resistance and consciously shifting to acceptance. As capacity develops, you can work with increasingly challenging sensations and emotions. This graduated approach builds the acceptance muscle that remains available during more significant challenges. Language plays an important role in cultivating acceptance. Notice phrases in your thinking like, "I can't stand this," or "this is unbearable," or "this has to stop." These absolute statements often intensify suffering by creating additional resistance and fear. Replacing them with more accurate language like, "This is difficult, but I can be with it," or "This is unpleasant, and I'm still breathing," helps shift your relationship with pain. These aren't just semantic differences, but reflect fundamental changes in how you relate to discomfort. Body awareness supports acceptance by revealing where we physically hold resistance. Common patterns include tightening the jaw, clenching the fists, hunching the shoulders, or holding the breath when pain arises. By noticing these physical manifestations of resistance, we can consciously release tension, creating more spaciousness around the pain experience. This physical softening often precedes and supports mental acceptance. What many practitioners discover through working with acceptance is that much of our suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our desperate attempts to avoid it. There's a profound relief that comes with finally stopping the exhausting fight against reality, as one chronic pain patient expressed. when I finally stopped trying to make the pain go away and simply allowed it to be there, something shifted. The pain didn't disappear, but my suffering decreased dramatically. Acceptance practice reveals an important paradox. The things we resist tend to persist in our awareness, while what we accept can transform and often move through us more easily. When we stop creating additional suffering through resistance, we sometimes discover that the original pain isn't as overwhelming as our fear had suggested. Even when intense sensations remain, our capacity to be with them expands, revealing a freedom that doesn't depend on circumstances being exactly as we wish. The power of acceptance extends beyond individual pain management to our broader relationship with life's inevitable challenges. Through consistent practice, we develop resilience that comes not from avoiding difficulty, but from knowing we can meet whatever arises with presence and dignity. This represents a profound shift from the fragility that comes with needing life to be a certain way to the strength that emerges from being able to work skillfully with life as it actually is. The power of acceptance extends beyond individual pain management to our broader relationship with life's inevitable challenges. Through consistent practice, we develop resilience that comes not from avoiding difficulty, but from knowing we can meet whatever arises with presence and dignity. This represents a profound shift from the fragility that comes with needing life to be a certain way to the strength that emerges from being able to work skillfully with life as it actually is. Cultivating equanimity, upekkha, in the face of emotional ups and downs, while acceptance helps us work with our present reality. The Buddhist practice of equanimity, upekkha, develops our capacity to maintain mental balance through all of life's fluctuations. Equanimity represents one of the four divine abodes or sublime states in Buddhist psychology, alongside loving kindness, compassion, and appreciative joy. It's often described as a mind that remains steady and unshaken regardless of what's happening, neither pulled into grasping after pleasant experiences nor pushed into aversion toward unpleasant ones. Equanimity is frequently misunderstood in Western contexts as emotional flatness or indifference. In reality, it's quite the opposite. True equanimity isn't about not feeling, it's about feeling everything fully while maintaining a balanced perspective that isn't overwhelmed by those feelings. It's a quality of mind that remains engaged and present without becoming caught in reactivity. Think of it as emotional resilience rather than emotional suppression. This mental stability proves invaluable when facing physical or emotional pain. Without equanimity, we tend to amplify suffering through dramatic reactions. Panic when pain intensifies, desperate grasping when relief appears, frustration when treatments don't work as quickly as hoped, or despair when symptoms return after improvement. These emotional roller coasters drain our energy and often make pain management more difficult. Equanimity provides stability amid these fluctuations, allowing for more effective responses to changing conditions. The practice of equanimity dissolves habitual patterns of aversion toward pain and attachment to pleasure, freeing the mind from the emotional roller coaster that intensifies suffering. When pleasant sensations arise, equanimity helps us enjoy them fully without clutching at them. When unpleasant sensations appear, it allows us to acknowledge them without becoming overwhelmed or defined by them. This balanced stance creates a profound inner freedom, the ability to experience everything without being controlled by anything. Specific meditations in the Buddhist tradition cultivate equanimity through contemplation of karma and interdependence, revealing how our relationship with experiences, not the experiences themselves, determines our well-being. One traditional practice involves reflecting on how all beings experience the results of their actions. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions. This contemplation helps us understand that many aspects of our pain have complex causes beyond our immediate control, reducing unnecessary self-blame while encouraging responsible choices going forward. Equanimity develops gradually through contemplation of the universal nature of suffering, recognizing that all beings face pain and loss. This broad perspective helps counter the isolation and self-pity that often accompany chronic pain. When we recognize that millions of others are currently experiencing similar or greater suffering, or our personal pain doesn't disappear, but it does become less overwhelming. We're part of the human community rather than singled out for unique suffering. The mental balance of equanimity provides a solid foundation for all the other practices we've discussed. Without some degree of equanimity, mindfulness can be overwhelmed by strong emotions, compassion can turn to burnout, and acceptance can collapse into resignation. With equanimity, these practices become more stable and effective, creating a resilient framework for working with all types of pain. Practically speaking, we can develop equanimity through both formal meditation and daily life situations. In formal practice, we might intentionally bring to mind moderately challenging situations and notice our reactions, gently cultivating a more balanced response. In daily life, we can use phrases like, "this too," or "can I be with this just as it is?" When facing difficulties, reminding ourselves of our capacity to meet all experiences with steadiness. Physical pain provides an excellent training ground for equanimity. When discomfort arises, we can observe how quickly the mind jumps to aversion, often adding stories about how unfair or unbearable the situation is. Simply noticing these mental movements and gently returning to a more balanced perspective gradually builds the equanimity muscle. Over time, the gap between sensation and reaction widens, creating space for wiser responses. Emotional pain similarly offers opportunities to cultivate equanimity. When strong emotions like grief, fear, or anger arise, we typically either suppress them, thinking we shouldn't feel that way, or become completely identified with them, believing we are the emotion. Equanimity offers a middle path, acknowledging emotions fully while maintaining enough perspective to recognize they are temporary states, not our entire identity. The Buddhist understanding of impermanence supports equanimity by reminding us that no state, pleasant or painful, lasts forever. When experiencing intense pain, equanimity helps us recognize this too shall pass. When enjoying relief or pleasure, equanimity reminds us not to cling, as this too will change. This realistic perspective on the changing nature of all experiences helps prevent the extremes of despair during difficult times or complacency during easier periods. Interestingly, equanimity also enhances our ability to enjoy positive experiences more fully, without the desperate grasping that comes from fear of losing pleasant states. We can actually be more present for joy, comfort, and connection when they occur. Many practitioners report that as equanimity develops, they paradoxically enjoy life's pleasures more deeply, precisely because they're not clinging to them so tightly. For those working with chronic conditions, equanimity offers particular benefits. The unpredictable nature of many chronic illnesses, with symptoms that fluctuate unpredictably, can create tremendous emotional strain as hopes rise and fall with each change in condition. Equanimity helps maintain a steadier perspective through these fluctuations, recognizing that neither improvement nor deterioration tells the whole story. This balanced view conserves emotional energy and supports better decision-making about treatment options. When fully developed, equanimity allows us to respond with wisdom and compassion even in emotionally intense situations, maintaining mental stability that serves as the foundation for all other Buddhist practices. This doesn't mean becoming passive or disengaged, but rather developing the capacity to act from a place of balance rather than reactivity. Equanimous action tends to be more effective precisely because it isn't clouded by emotional extremes. The cultivation of equanimity represents a lifelong practice rather than a destination we reach permanently. Even experienced practitioners encounter situations that challenge their balance. What changes with practice isn't the complete absence of reactivity, but our recovery time, how quickly we can return to center when knocked off balance. This growing resilience makes pain of all kinds more manageable. not because the pain itself changes, but because our relationship with it becomes more spacious and stable. Number sign, visualization practices and mantras for transforming the pain experience, building on the mental stability that equanimity provides. Buddhist traditions have developed sophisticated techniques that utilize our mind's natural capacity to generate images and sounds as powerful tools for transforming our experience of pain. These visualization practices and mantras, particularly developed in the Vajrayana and Mahayana traditions, offer accessible methods that can significantly alter our relationship with physical and emotional discomfort. Visualization practices take advantage of the mind's remarkable ability to generate internal imagery that affects our physiological and psychological state. When we're in pain, our imagination typically works against us, creating catastrophic scenarios about what the pain means or how long it might last. Buddhist visualization techniques deliberately redirect this powerful mental faculty toward healing imagery that activates inner resources often inaccessible during states of intense suffering. These practices involve creating clear mental images of healing light, compassionate deities, or purifying energy that interacts with painful areas or difficult emotions. For example, you might visualize a warm, golden light flowing into areas of discomfort, imagining this light dissolving tension and bringing relief. The imagery doesn't need to be complex. Even simple visualizations of space opening up around pain or color changing from dark to light can create significant shifts in your experience. Healing visualizations work through multiple mechanisms. They focus attention on something other than the pain itself, interrupting rumination cycles that amplify suffering. They activate the parasympathetic nervous system, reducing stress hormones that heighten pain sensitivity. Perhaps most importantly, they provide the mind with alternative ways of relating to discomfort beyond the habitual patterns of resistance and aversion. Mantras, sacred sounds or phrases repeated aloud or mentally, complement visualization practices by engaging our auditory faculties. Traditional Buddhist mantras like Om Mani Padme Hum or Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Swaha have been used for centuries to focus the mind and create positive mental states. These specific sound combinations aren't just about their literal meaning, but also about their vibrational quality that influences the nervous system and emotional states. Research in neuroscience demonstrates that visualizations and mantras can activate regions of the brain associated with emotional self-regulation and pain modulation. Brain imaging studies have shown that when people engage in guided imagery or mantra recitation, activity increases in prefrontal areas associated with attention control and decreases in limbic regions involved in pain and emotional reactivity. This neurological evidence helps explain why these ancient practices can create measurable changes in pain perception. Tibetan Buddhism has developed particularly elaborate healing visualization practices. For example, the Medicine Buddha practice involves visualizing a deep blue Buddha figure radiating healing light that purifies illness and pain. The Green Tara practice helps transform anxiety and fear through connection with this swift-acting, compassionate deity. Vajrasattva visualization focuses on purification, imagining white light and nectar flowing through the body, cleansing physical and emotional blockages. These traditional practices have been adapted for contemporary therapeutic contexts with promising results. Many pain management programs now incorporate guided imagery that draws on these ancient techniques without their specifically Buddhist religious content. The core elements, focused attention, positive imagery, and engagement of multiple senses, remain effective regardless of one's religious background or beliefs. The combination of visualization, mantra, dot, and conscious breathing creates a powerful multisensory intervention that can interrupt cycles of physical and emotional pain. By engaging visual, auditory, and kinesthetic channels simultaneously, these practices create an immersive experience that can temporarily override pain signals and create windows of relief. During these windows, new neural pathways can form that make alternative pain responses more accessible in the future. For beginners, guided practices often work best. you might start with audio recordings that lead you through simple visualizations, gradually building your capacity to generate and maintain healing imagery independently. Even 5 to 10 minutes of practice daily can create meaningful changes in your relationship with pain. As with any skill, regular practice enhances your ability to use these techniques effectively when you need them most. One particularly accessible practice combines visualization with the breath. As you inhale, imagine drawing in healing light, energy, or space. Direct this positive energy to areas of discomfort or emotional distress. As you exhale, visualize releasing tension, pain, or negative emotions as dark smoke or clouds that dissolve into space. This simple technique can be used anywhere, anytime, making it valuable for managing pain in daily life situations. While traditional Buddhist practices often involve complex deity visualizations, simpler approaches can be equally effective for pain transformation. Visualizing a compassionate presence, perhaps a wise figure, healing light, or simply a sense of loving awareness surrounding and permeating painful areas can significantly shift your experience. The key is generating a felt sense of benevolence and care directed toward your suffering. Mantras can range from traditional Sanskrit syllables to simple phrases in your native language. What matters is finding sounds that resonate with you personally and help create a sense of calm, centeredness, or connection. Some people work with traditional Buddhist mantras like Om Mani Padme Hum, associated with compassion, while others prefer simple phrases like peace or letting go repeated with the breath. The rhythmic quality of mantra recitation helps interrupt pain-focused thinking and creates a soothing effect on the nervous system. The effectiveness of visualization and mantra practices isn't dependent on having perfect concentration or completely eliminating other thoughts, even with a wandering mind. The brief periods when you're engaged with the practice create beneficial shifts. Each time you notice your attention has drifted and gently return to the visualization or mantra, you're strengthening your capacity to redirect attention away from pain-centered thinking, a valuable skill in itself. What many practitioners discover is that these techniques work best when approached with an attitude of gentle exploration rather than desperate grasping for results. Ironically, visualizing with intense expectation that pain must disappear immediately often creates tension that counteracts the practice's benefits. A more playful, curious approach, let me see what happens when I try this, typically yields better results. These practices can be adapted for various pain conditions and personal preferences. Visual thinkers might emphasize detailed imagery, while those more oriented to sounds might focus primarily on mantras. People with kinesthetic preferences might combine visualization with awareness of physical sensations like warmth, tingling, or pulsing. The practices become most effective when tailored to your unique cognitive style. For those experiencing emotional pain such as grief, anxiety, or depression, specific visualizations can address these conditions. For grief, visualizing a compassionate presence holding your sorrow with understanding can be deeply comforting. For anxiety, imagery of protective boundaries or expanding space often helps. For depression, visualizations involving light, warmth, and connection can counter feelings of darkness and isolation. The combination of all the practices we've explored, mindfulness, compassion, understanding impermanence, conscious breathing, applying the Four Noble Truths, disidentification, body scanning, acceptance, equanimity, and now visualization and mantras, creates a comprehensive toolkit for transforming our relationship with pain. Each practice offers distinct benefits while supporting and enhancing the others. Together, they address the physical, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual dimensions of suffering, offering multiple entry points for healing. The combination of all the practices we've explored, mindfulness, compassion, understanding impermanence, conscious breathing, applying the Four Noble Truths: disidentification, body scanning, acceptance, equanimity, and now visualization and mantras, creates a comprehensive toolkit for transforming our relationship with pain. Each practice offers distinct benefits while supporting and enhancing the others. Together, they address the physical, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual dimensions of suffering, offering multiple entry points for healing. The Eightfold Path as a structure for a life with less suffering. These various techniques and approaches we've been discussing aren't isolated practices, but fit within a coherent framework that the Buddha designed to address suffering comprehensively. This framework, known as the Noble Eightfold Path, offers a holistic approach to dissolving suffering through the integration of ethical conduct, meditative practices, and wisdom development in all aspects of life. The Buddha recognized that transforming our relationship with pain and suffering requires more than meditation alone. Our daily behaviors, speech patterns, livelihood choices, and fundamental understanding of reality all contribute to either increasing or decreasing our suffering. The Eightfold Path addresses all these dimensions, creating a comprehensive lifestyle approach to liberation from pain. The ethical components of the path, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, significantly reduce sources of emotional distress that originate from behaviors harmful to ourselves and others. When we communicate dishonestly or harshly, act in ways that harm others, or earn our living through means that cause suffering, we inevitably create internal conflict and guilt that amplifies any physical or emotional pain we might already be experiencing. Conversely, when our speech, actions, and work align with our deeper values, we establish an inner harmony that provides a stable foundation for working with unavoidable pain. Right speech involves communication that's truthful, kind, helpful, and timely. When we're experiencing pain, we often fall into speech patterns that intensify our suffering, complaining excessively, speaking harshly to those trying to help us, or engaging in self-talk filled with catastrophizing and self-pity. By cultivating more skillful communication, both with others and in our own minds, we reduce unnecessary suffering. Simply noticing the impact of different types of speech on your pain experience can be eye-opening. Many people discover that venting sometimes provides momentary relief, but often reinforces pain-centered identity in the longer term. Right action involves behavior that doesn't create harm for ourselves or others. This includes avoiding actions that directly cause physical pain, like pushing our bodies beyond reasonable limits, as well as behaviors that create emotional distress, such as actions we later regret. For those dealing with chronic pain, right action often means finding the middle path between pushing too hard and giving up entirely, making wise choices about activity levels, treatments, and self-care practices that honor the body's current limitations while supporting optimal functioning and gradual healing. Right livelihood extends these ethical principles into our work life, encouraging career choices and working conditions that don't exacerbate suffering. For many people with chronic pain or emotional challenges, this might involve advocating for accommodations, considering career changes to reduce physical strain, or establishing healthier boundaries around work hours and stress levels. The Buddha recognized that how we earn our living occupies a significant portion of our time and energy, making it crucial for a life with less suffering. The meditative components of the path, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration develop specific mental skills for working directly with painful body and mind states. These three factors work together. Right effort involves applying appropriate energy to cultivating beneficial mind states and reducing harmful ones. Right mindfulness involves maintaining awareness of our present experience without getting lost in reactivity. And right concentration involves developing the mind's ability to remain steady and focused, even amid distractions or discomfort. Right effort teaches the crucial middle path between straining too hard and not trying enough, a balance that's particularly important when working with pain. Pushing aggressively to eliminate pain often creates additional tension that makes suffering worse, while completely giving up leads to helplessness and depression. The Buddha described right effort as like tuning a stringed instrument, not too tight, not too loose. This balanced approach conserves energy while making steady progress toward greater freedom from suffering. Right mindfulness, which we explored in our first topic, provides the continuous awareness that allows us to catch habitual reactions to pain before they escalate. Through mindfulness practice, we develop the ability to notice when we're beginning to resist pain, catastrophize about it, or identify with it as me or mine. This awareness creates the crucial pause that allows us to choose more skillful responses rather than being driven by automatic reactions that typically intensify suffering. Right concentration develops the mind's ability to remain steady even amid physical or emotional storms. Through practices that cultivate deep focus, we build mental stability that isn't easily shaken by changing sensations or circumstances. This concentrated awareness can actually enter into painful experiences with such precision and steadiness that it transforms our relationship with them completely. Many experienced meditators report that with sufficient concentration, even intense physical pain can be experienced as simply energy or vibration, without the overlay of suffering. The wisdom components of the path, right understanding and right intention, transform our fundamental relationship with pain by helping us see its true nature and approach it with beneficial attitudes. Right understanding includes recognizing the Four Noble Truths we discussed earlier, as well as directly perceiving the three characteristics of all experience: impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not self. This wisdom cuts through the misperceptions that transform inevitable pain into optional suffering. Right intention involves approaching our pain experience with attitudes of renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness rather than with craving, aversion, and aggression. When pain arises, our natural tendency is to crave its absence, feel aversion toward the sensation, and sometimes even develop a kind of aggression toward the painful body part or situation. Right intention cultivates the opposite qualities, letting go, renunciation, of our demand that pain not be present, maintaining goodwill toward ourselves and our experience even when it's difficult, and avoiding harmfulness in how we treat ourselves and others during challenging times. The beauty of the Eightfold Path lies in its synergistic nature, where each element supports and strengthens the others, creating a virtuous cycle of transformation. Ethical living supports meditation by reducing regret and restlessness. Meditation deepens wisdom by clarifying perception. Wisdom guides ethical choices by revealing the consequences of our actions. Together, they create conditions where our relationship with suffering can fundamentally transform. This integrated approach recognizes that pain and suffering exist within a complex context that includes our behaviors, mental states, and fundamental understandings. By addressing all these dimensions simultaneously, the Eightfold Path offers a comprehensive approach to liberation that works at multiple levels. This doesn't mean we need to perfect all 8 aspects before experiencing any benefit. Even small improvements in any area can reduce suffering significantly. For those living with chronic pain or persistent emotional challenges, the Eightfold Path provides both immediate practical guidance and a long-term framework for deeper transformation. On any given day, we can ask ourselves, how might I communicate more skillfully about my pain today? What actions would support rather than hinder my well-being? How can I apply appropriate effort without straining? What does mindful awareness reveal about my current experience? These practical questions, derived from the path, guide us toward increasingly skillful responses to our situation. The Eightfold Path also offers hope by showing that even when certain aspects of pain cannot be eliminated, as is sometimes the case with chronic conditions, we still have multiple dimensions where transformation is possible. We may not have complete control over physical sensations, but we retain significant influence over our speech, actions, effort, awareness, concentration, understanding, and intentions. These areas of agency become increasingly important when dealing with persistent pain conditions that don't respond completely to medical treatment. The practice of metta, loving kindness, directed at your own suffering body. While the Eightfold Path provides a comprehensive framework for addressing suffering, specific practices within that framework can be particularly powerful for working with physical pain. One of the most transformative is metta, or loving kindness practice, especially when directed toward your own body during experiences of pain or illness. This practice dissolves habitual patterns of aversion and hostility that frequently accompany physical suffering, creating a relationship of friendship with the body even when it's experiencing discomfort. When pain arises, our natural tendency is to develop an adversarial relationship with the body. We often mentally separate from painful areas, viewing them as enemies or problems to be eliminated. We might feel betrayed by the body, angry at it for causing us distress, or simply wish to disconnect from physical experience altogether. While understandable, this antagonistic relationship with the body typically intensifies suffering and impedes healing. Metta practice cultivates the opposite approach, a relationship of friendship, care, and kindness toward the body, including those parts experiencing discomfort, rather than fighting against physical reality. We learn to hold our bodily experience with the same kindness we might offer to a dear friend in pain. This shift from opposition to friendship creates profound changes in our experience of discomfort, even when the physical sensations themselves remain present. The practice involves adapting traditional metta phrases to direct kindness specifically toward painful areas. Traditional phrases like, "May I be safe," "May I be healthy," "May I be at ease," and "May I be peaceful" can be modified to address the body directly. May this body be held with kindness. May this pain be met with gentleness. Or, may I care for this discomfort with compassion. These phrases are repeated silently while bringing attention to the area experiencing pain. Neuroscientist Kristin Neff has demonstrated that self-compassion practices like metta activate the parasympathetic nervous system and release oxytocin and endorphins, natural hormones that reduce pain perception. This means loving kindness isn't merely a nice sentiment, but produces tangible physiological changes that directly affect our experience of pain. The body responds differently to pain when bathed in kindness versus when experiencing aversion and resistance. When we practice metta regularly for the body, we interrupt the negative cycle where anger and frustration with pain create additional tension and increase suffering. Many pain conditions involve muscle tension as both a cause and result of discomfort. When we're frustrated with pain, we typically tense around it, which increases pressure, reduces blood flow, and amplifies the original sensation. Loving kindness helps break this cycle by promoting physical relaxation and emotional ease. Metta dissolves the internal fragmentation caused by pain, reintegrating parts of the body we tend to reject or see as enemies when they experience unpleasant sensations. This reintegration has both psychological and physiological benefits. Psychologically, it reduces the energy drain that comes from maintaining an internal battle. Physiologically, it promotes better circulation, immune function, and nervous system regulation throughout the entire body, including painful areas. The practice can be approached gradually, especially if directing kindness toward intensely painful areas feels difficult at first. You might begin by offering metta to parts of your body that feel neutral or pleasant, establishing a feeling of goodwill and warmth. Then slowly expand this kind attention to include mildly uncomfortable areas, and eventually, when you feel ready, 2 regions experiencing more intense pain. This graduated approach builds capacity without overwhelming your system. Unlike some meditation practices that require perfect focus or specific postures, metta can be practiced in whatever position is most comfortable for your body. You can practice lying down if sitting is painful, or while gently moving if stillness causes discomfort. The flexibility of this practice makes it accessible even during flare-ups or difficult periods when more formal meditation might seem impossible. For those experiencing chronic pain, metta offers something particularly valuable, a way to care for the pain that doesn't depend on eliminating it. When we've tried everything to get rid of persistent pain without complete success, we need approaches that help us live well with our current reality while remaining open to healing possibilities. Loving kindness creates a sustainable relationship with pain that avoids both denial and helpless surrender. The phrases used in metta practice serve as reminders of our intentions, but the heart of the practice lies in the actual feeling of kindness that gradually develops. As you repeat phrases like, "May this pain be held with gentleness," try to genuinely feel that gentleness flowing toward the discomfort. If authentic kindness feels difficult to access, simply notice that struggle with compassion too. May I be kind to myself even when kindness is hard to find. Some people find it helpful to imagine kindness as having physical qualities, perhaps visualizing it as warm light, soothing water, or gentle hands that touch painful areas with care. These sensory dimensions of the practice help bridge the gap between conceptual kindness and felt experience, making the practice more embodied and effective. Experiment with different sensory qualities to discover what resonates most strongly for you. Metta practice reveals an important truth about pain. Our relationship with it significantly influences how we experience it. 2 people can have identical physical sensations, but vastly different levels of suffering based on how they relate to those sensations. By cultivating a relationship of kindness rather than aversion, we change not just our thoughts about pain, but our entire lived experience of it. Many practitioners report that while metta doesn't always eliminate pain, it transforms their suffering by creating an internal environment of support rather than struggle. The benefits of directing loving kindness toward the body extend beyond pain management to our general relationship with embodiment. Many of us have complex, sometimes troubled relationships with our bodies due to cultural messaging, past trauma, or health challenges. Regular metta practice gradually heals this relationship, helping us experience our bodies as allies rather than adversaries or objects to be controlled. This improved relationship supports overall health and resilience even beyond specific pain conditions. Interestingly, metta practice often naturally expands beyond self-directed kindness to include others who suffer in similar ways. As you develop greater compassion for your own pain, you may find increased empathy for others experiencing physical challenges. This widening circle of compassion reduces the isolation that often accompanies chronic pain, connecting you to the larger human community where physical suffering is a universal experience. Recognizing that millions of others are working with similar challenges can provide meaningful perspective and support. The combination of metta with the other practices we've explored creates a particularly powerful approach to pain transformation. For example, mindfulness helps you clearly see pain without aversion or clinging. Compassion provides the emotional support needed during difficult experiences. Equanimity offers balance when pain fluctuates. And now metta adds the crucial element of active kindness toward the very sensations you're experiencing. Together, these practices address the multidimensional nature of pain and suffering, creating conditions where healing can naturally emerge. The combination of metta with the other practices we've explored creates a particularly powerful approach to pain transformation. For example, mindfulness helps you clearly see pain without aversion or clinging. Compassion provides the emotional support needed during difficult experiences. Equanimity offers balance when pain fluctuates. And now metta adds the crucial element of active kindness toward the very sensations you're experiencing. Together, these practices address the multidimensional nature of pain and suffering, creating conditions where healing can naturally emerge. Dissolution of narratives. How Buddhism addresses stories of victimization. While developing kindness toward our physical pain is essential, many of us struggle equally with the mental narratives we construct around our suffering. Buddhist practices offer powerful tools for recognizing, questioning, and eventually dissolving limiting narratives that transform painful experiences into fixed identities of victimization. This work complements the physical and emotional approaches we've explored by addressing the cognitive dimension of suffering. When painful experiences occur, whether physical illness, emotional trauma, or challenging life circumstances, our minds naturally create stories about what happened. We try to make sense of our suffering by constructing narratives about why it happened, what it means, and how it defines us. While this meaning-making is natural, some narratives can trap us in cycles of suffering long after the original painful event has passed. Through mindfulness practice, we develop the ability to distinguish between the objective facts of painful experiences and the layers of interpretation, meaning, and identity we build around them. For example, there's a difference between acknowledging I experienced an injury that caused pain, a factual observation, and I'm a victim who will never recover from what happened to me, an interpretive narrative that solidifies suffering into identity. Mindfulness helps us see these stories as mental constructions rather than absolute truths about reality. Buddhist contemplation teaches us to recognize how the mind constantly creates causal stories. This happened because I am this way due to, that often amplify suffering beyond the original event. These explanatory narratives usually aim to establish control or certainty in uncertain situations, but paradoxically can lock us into limited perspectives that perpetuate pain. While understanding causes and conditions can be helpful, rigid narratives about why we suffer often create additional distress by narrowing our view of possibilities. Practices of investigation from Buddhist traditions like Dzogchen and Mahamudra invite us to question: who is suffering? Who is the victim? Is there a permanent me to whom these things happened? This isn't philosophical abstraction, but practical inquiry that loosens the grip of solidified victim identities. When we look closely, we discover that what seemed like a solid, permanent self who was victimized is actually a flowing stream of changing experiences, thoughts, emotions, and sensations. This direct recognition can be profoundly liberating. The Buddhist concept of not-self, anatta, offers a perspective that allows us to acknowledge painful experiences without crystallizing them into fixed identities. This doesn't mean denying that experiences happened or minimizing their impact. Rather, it means recognizing that these experiences, while significant, don't define the totality of who we are. We are more spacious and fluid than any narrative about us, including victim narratives. This perspective helps explain why two people can experience similar painful events but respond very differently. One person might become defined by a victim narrative, while another acknowledges the pain without allowing it to become their primary identity. Buddhist practices help us move toward the latter approach, not by denying suffering, but by recognizing our inherent capacity to hold experiences without being defined by them. An important clarification: dissolving limiting narratives doesn't mean invalidating genuine harm or injustice. Buddhist practice encourages clear seeing of reality, including recognizing when actual harm has occurred. The liberation comes not from denying painful realities, but from seeing how our additional layers of narrative often extend suffering long after events have passed. We can acknowledge injury, seek appropriate justice, and take needed protective action without constructing an entire identity around victimization. Practically speaking, working with narratives involves first becoming aware of the stories we tell ourselves about our pain. What meaning have you assigned to your suffering? Do you perceive it as punishment, random cruelty, evidence of personal inadequacy, or proof that the world is against you? Simply noticing these interpretations as interpretations, rather than as reality itself, begins to loosen their hold. This awareness creates space between experience and explanation that allows new possibilities to emerge. The practice involves bringing mindful awareness to thoughts like, "I'll always be damaged by what happened," or "nothing good can come from this suffering," when they arise. Rather than believing or fighting these thoughts, we simply observe them as mental events. There's that familiar narrative arising. This recognition without identification gradually reduces the thought pattern's power and automatic nature. Over time, we develop the ability to hold our pain stories more lightly, seeing them as just one possible interpretation rather than the definitive truth about our lives. Compassion plays a crucial role in this narrative work. Challenging our victim stories without compassion can lead to toxic forms of spiritual bypassing, where we deny legitimate suffering or blame ourselves inappropriately. Buddhist practice emphasizes kind awareness, approaching our limiting narratives with the same gentle attention we might offer to physical pain. We don't aggressively attack our stories, but compassionately recognize how they've tried to protect us, even as we outgrow their usefulness. Community support often proves invaluable in this process of narrative transformation. Within supportive Buddhist practice communities, we encounter others working with their own limiting stories, which helps normalize the process and reduce shame. Hearing how others have moved beyond victim narratives provides inspiration and practical guidance. This communal dimension creates safety for the vulnerable work of examining deeply held beliefs about our suffering. The dissolution of limiting narratives creates tremendous freedom in how we relate to past and present suffering. When we're no longer confined to a single story about what our pain means or who we are because of it, new possibilities naturally emerge. People often discover previously unimagined capacities for resilience, growth, and even helping others facing similar challenges. The spaciousness that comes from loosening fixed narratives allows a more fluid, creative response to life's inevitable difficulties. This narrative work also helps us avoid creating new victim stories around current pain. When physical discomfort or emotional struggle arises, we can notice the mind's tendency to immediately construct limiting interpretations. "This always happens to me. I'll never get better. No one understands what I'm going through." Catching these narratives early, before they solidify, prevents unnecessary layers of suffering from accumulating around the initial discomfort. Over time, this practice develops what we might call narrative flexibility, the ability to hold multiple perspectives on our pain simultaneously. Rather than being locked into a single interpretation, we can see our experiences through various lenses, choosing the most helpful perspective for a particular moment. This flexibility doesn't deny painful realities but expands our relationship with them, creating space for healing possibilities that rigid narratives often preclude. The ultimate freedom comes in recognizing that while stories about our suffering may be useful at times, they're never the complete truth of who we are. Our fundamental awareness, that which knows all experiences but isn't limited by any of them, remains unharmed even by the most difficult circumstances. This recognition doesn't eliminate pain, but transforms our relationship with it, revealing a dimension of freedom that exists regardless of external conditions or personal history. Tonglen meditation techniques for transforming pain into compassion. The dissolution of limiting narratives creates space for more skillful approaches to pain. And one of the most powerful of these is Tonglen meditation. This Tibetan Buddhist practice takes a radical approach to suffering by intentionally breathing in pain and breathing out relief. While this might initially sound counterintuitive, Even alarming, Tonglen has helped countless practitioners transform their relationship with both personal and collective suffering for centuries. Unlike our normal impulse to avoid pain at all costs, Tonglen invites us to move toward difficulty with courage and compassion. The practice's name literally means giving and taking, or sending and receiving. When practicing Tonglen, we visualize breathing in the suffering of ourselves and others, symbolized as dark, heavy smoke or clouds, and breathing out relief, happiness, and healing, visualized as light, dot, spaciousness, or whatever quality is needed. At the heart of Tonglen is a profound shift in how we relate to pain. Rather than seeing suffering as something to escape, the practice recognizes it as a doorway to genuine compassion and connection with all beings. By willingly opening to our own pain and the pain of others, we dissolve the barriers of self-protection that often keep us isolated and afraid. This radical openness creates a profound sense of connection that itself serves as an antidote to suffering. The practice begins with acknowledging our own pain with compassion before extending to others. You might start by bringing to mind a specific physical discomfort, emotional struggle, or difficult situation you're facing. As you breathe in, visualize taking in the full reality of this suffering as a dark dot, heavy smoke or cloud. Rather than resisting it, you allow it to enter your heart, where it meets what Tibetan Buddhists call the flame of compassion, an indestructible warmth and openness at your core that can transform any suffering. As you exhale, visualize sending out light, space, relief, or whatever quality would bring healing to your situation. This might be courage, patience, acceptance, joy, or simply the relief of pain. The visualization isn't just mental imagery, but involves a genuine feeling of offering what's needed, both to yourself and eventually to all beings experiencing similar struggles. Once you've established this rhythm with your own suffering, breathing in pain, transforming it, breathing out relief, you gradually expand the practice to include others. You might think of a loved one facing challenges and breathe in their suffering along with your own, then breathe out relief for both of you. Eventually, the practice expands to include strangers, difficult people, and ultimately all beings, recognizing the universal nature of pain and our shared capacity for transformation. This practice directly counters our habitual self-centeredness around pain. When suffering arises, we typically contract around it, thinking, "Why me?" and focusing exclusively on our own discomfort. Tonglen uses these very moments of pain as opportunities to remember our connection with countless others experiencing similar challenges. Rather than being singled out for suffering, we're participating in a universal human experience, a recognition that often brings surprising comfort and strength. Advanced practitioners use Tonglen to work directly with their most difficult pains, discovering that willingness to feel fully, rather than resist, often dissolves the perceived solidity of suffering. This seems paradoxical until experienced directly. By opening to pain rather than fighting it, we often find it's not as overwhelming as our resistance had suggested. The practice reveals that much of our suffering comes from struggling against what's already here, rather than from the initial sensation or situation itself. The transformative power of Tonglen comes partly from reversing our usual pattern of grasping at pleasure and pushing away pain. This habitual pattern, which the Buddha identified as a primary cause of suffering, creates a fragmented relationship with experience where we're constantly moving toward or away from what's happening rather than being fully present with it. Tonglen gradually dissolves this pattern by intentionally moving toward difficulty with compassion while offering away comfort without clinging. In its essence, Tonglen transforms pain from obstacle to path, from enemy to teacher, revealing how suffering can become the catalyst for awakening the compassionate heart. This perspective shift doesn't trivialize pain or suggest it sent as a lesson. but it does recognize that our response to inevitable suffering can either deepen our wisdom and compassion or reinforce our patterns of reactivity and isolation. For those new to the practice, beginning with minor discomforts is wise. You might start with a mild headache, minor frustration, or everyday stress rather than your most overwhelming pain. As your capacity develops, you can gradually work with increasingly challenging experiences. This graduated approach builds confidence in the practice while developing the compassion muscle that will be available during more significant challenges. Many practitioners combine Tonglen with the understanding of impermanence we explored earlier. As you breathe in suffering, you recognize its changing, insubstantial nature. As you breathe out relief, you don't grasp at it as permanent. This awareness of constant flow prevents the practice from becoming another form of struggle, grasping at transformation rather than accepting what is. The practice becomes most powerful when it embodies this gentle, non-grasping quality. Physical posture supports the practice of Tonglen. Sitting with a straight but relaxed spine creates an internal openness that facilitates the visualization of breathing in suffering and breathing out relief. However, the practice can be adapted to any position, making it accessible even during periods of physical limitation. Some practitioners find it helpful to place a hand on the heart center while practicing, physically connecting with the location where transformation is visualized as occurring. The effects of regular Tonglen practice often extend far beyond formal meditation sessions. Practitioners frequently report that when encountering difficulty in daily life, their automatic response gradually shifts from aversion to compassionate engagement. Instead of immediately contracting around pain or trying to push it away, they naturally open to it with the transformative awareness developed through practice. This shift represents a fundamental change in relationship with suffering. Tonglen offers particular benefits for those in helping professions or caregiver roles. People working with others' suffering often experience empathic distress or burnout from absorbing pain without a framework for processing it. Tonglen provides exactly this framework, a way to open to others' suffering without becoming overwhelmed by it, transforming it through compassion rather than being depleted by it. Many healthcare professionals, therapists, and caregivers report that the practice sustains them through challenging work. The integration of Tonglen with the other practices we've explored creates a comprehensive approach to pain transformation. Mindfulness helps us see suffering clearly. Compassion provides emotional support during difficulty. Equanimity offers balance through changing conditions. Loving kindness cultivates active care for ourselves and others. Narrative work frees us from limiting stories about pain. And now Tonglen offers a direct method for transforming suffering into the very path of awakening. Together, these practices address suffering at every level of our experience, creating conditions for profound healing and freedom. The integration of Tonglen with the other practices we've explored creates a comprehensive approach to pain transformation. Mindfulness helps us see suffering clearly. Compassion provides emotional support during difficulty. Equanimity offers balance through changing conditions. Loving kindness cultivates active care for ourselves and others. Narrative work frees us from limiting stories about pain. And now, Tonglen offers a direct method for transforming suffering into the very path of awakening. Together, these practices address suffering at every level of our experience, creating conditions for profound healing and freedom. The Buddhist approach to working with difficult emotions like anger and fear, while practices like Tonglen help us work with suffering in general. Buddhism also offers specific approaches for working with particularly challenging emotions like anger, fear, anxiety, and grief. These difficult emotions often intensify our physical pain and create additional layers of suffering, making them important areas to address in any comprehensive approach to pain transformation. Buddhist traditions have developed sophisticated methods for working with challenging emotions, recognizing them not as enemies to be eliminated, but as energies that contain wisdom when approached skillfully. This perspective represents a significant shift from how many of us typically relate to difficult emotions. Rather than seeing anger or fear as problems to be solved or threats to be avoided, we learn to approach them with curious attention, discovering what they might have to teach us. The first step involves developing emotional literacy, the ability to recognize emotions in their early stages, before they completely overwhelm the mind and body. Many of us only identify emotions after they've fully erupted, at which point they're much harder to work with skillfully. Through regular mindfulness practice, we become more attuned to the subtle signs that emotions are arising, perhaps a slight tightening in the chest before anger fully develops, or a flutter in the stomach as anxiety begins to form. This early recognition creates a crucial window of opportunity. When we catch an emotion in its beginning stages, we have more options for how to respond. We might choose to investigate it with mindful awareness, express it in a constructive way, or simply allow it to be present without acting on it. This contrasts sharply with our usual patterns of either suppressing emotions until they eventually explode, or immediately acting them out in ways we later regret. Practices like R.A.I.N. recognize, allow, investigate, non-identification offer a structured protocol for working with intense emotions without repression or uncontrolled expression. When difficult emotions arise, we first recognize what's happening. Anger is present, or I notice fear arising. This simple naming already creates some space around the emotion rather than being completely identified with it. The next step involves allowing or accepting the emotion's presence, even if it's uncomfortable. This doesn't mean approving of the emotion or resigning ourselves to it, but simply acknowledging that it's already here. Fighting against an emotion that's already present typically intensifies it, while allowing creates space for it to naturally shift and change. Investigation involves bringing curious, non-judgmental attention to the emotion as a physical, energetic experience in the body. Where exactly do you feel anger? What sensations accompany fear? Is it static, or does it pulse and change? This detailed observation helps us experience emotions as bodily events rather than solid entities or absolute truths about our situation. Non-identification means recognizing that while emotions arise in our experience, they don't define who we are. I'm experiencing anger is quite different from I am angry. This subtle but important distinction prevents us from becoming completely identified with changing emotional states. We learn to hold emotions in a larger awareness rather than becoming completely consumed by them. Buddhist analytical meditation questions the apparent solidity of disturbing emotions, revealing them as composite and impermanent events, not absolute truths about ourselves or the world. When anger arises, for instance, we might investigate. Is this anger one solid thing or a complex mixture of bodily sensations, thoughts, memories, and energy? Does it stay exactly the same or does it fluctuate in intensity? This analysis doesn't dismiss the emotion but helps us relate to it more skillfully by seeing its true nature. Each difficult emotion requires slightly different approaches. For anger, Buddhist practice emphasizes first containing the energy safely, not acting it out harmfully, and then looking beneath the surface reaction to find what's actually being threatened. Often anger arises to protect something we value that feels endangered. By identifying the legitimate concern beneath the anger, we can address it more constructively while letting go of the destructive aspects of the emotion. Fear and anxiety benefit from practices that ground attention in the body and present moment, counteracting the tendency to project catastrophic futures. Simple techniques like feeling the sensations of the feet on the floor, counting breaths, or naming objects in the environment can interrupt anxiety spirals and return awareness to the present, where we often discover we're actually safe in this moment even if facing uncertain circumstances. Grief requires a particularly compassionate approach that creates safe space for the emotion to be fully felt rather than rushed through. Buddhist traditions acknowledge the natural human need to mourn losses, while also offering practices that help prevent grief from becoming a fixed identity. Regular compassion practices help create the emotional resilience needed to face grief fully without becoming overwhelmed by it. When we approach difficult emotions with attentive compassion, we discover that they naturally dissolve when not fed by identification or resistance. This doesn't mean we never experience anger, fear, or sadness, but that these emotions move through us more fluidly rather than becoming stuck patterns. Many practitioners report that emotions that previously lasted for days gradually begin to move through in hours or even minutes when approached with mindful awareness. The Buddhist approach goes beyond mere emotional management to seek deeper transformation. Traditional practices aim to recognize the Buddha nature or clear awareness underlying all emotional states. From this perspective, emotions are like weather patterns moving through the vast sky of awareness, sometimes turbulent, sometimes peaceful, but never defining the sky itself. This recognition of our fundamental nature beyond changing emotional states offers profound freedom. For those dealing with physical pain, working skillfully with difficult emotions becomes particularly important. Pain often triggers fear. Will this ever end? Anger. Why is this happening to me? Or despair. I can't handle this anymore. These emotional responses, while completely understandable, typically amplify the experience of suffering beyond the physical sensation itself. By addressing the emotional components of pain with the approaches described above, we can significantly reduce our overall suffering even when the physical sensation remains. Modern research in neuroscience and psychology has increasingly validated these ancient Buddhist approaches to emotion. Studies show that labeling emotions, naming feels, reduces amygdala activation and limbic system arousal. Mindful attention to emotions activates prefrontal regions associated with emotional regulation, and self-compassion practices have been shown to reduce stress hormones and inflammatory markers that can exacerbate pain conditions. The Buddhist emotional approach also recognizes that difficult emotions often contain important information and energy that can be harnessed constructively when not suppressed or acted out unconsciously. Anger can contain clarity about boundaries that need protection. Fear often points to legitimate threats that require attention. Sadness connects us with what we truly value. By working skillfully with emotions rather than against them, we access their inherent wisdom while avoiding their destructive potential. This balanced middle path, neither suppressing emotions nor being controlled by them, represents one of Buddhism's most valuable contributions to our understanding of emotional well-being. The approach isn't about achieving some perfect state where difficult emotions never arise, but developing a wiser, more spacious relationship with the full spectrum of human feeling. This relationship allows emotions to move through us without defining us, serving their proper function as temporary messengers rather than permanent identities. Interdependence, pratitya samutpada. Understanding the roots of emotional pain. While working directly with emotions as they arise is essential, Buddhism also offers profound insights into the underlying causes of emotional suffering through the principle of interdependence, or pratitya samutpada in Sanskrit. This teaching reveals how emotional pain arises conditionally through multiple interconnected factors, never from a single isolated cause. Understanding interdependence helps us address emotional suffering at its roots, rather than just managing symptoms. The principle of interdependence tells us that everything arises in dependence upon multiple conditions coming together. Nothing exists independently or has a single cause. This applies equally to our emotional states, which emerge from complex interactions between our biology, past experiences, current environment, thoughts, perceptions, and actions. This understanding dissolves the tendency to oversimplify the origins of emotional suffering, opening multiple points of intervention for its transformation. When emotional pain arises, we often look for a single cause. I feel anxious because of that upcoming presentation, or I'm depressed because of what they said to me. While these immediate triggers certainly contribute to our emotional states, Buddhist analysis reveals that our reactions depend on many other factors: our past experiences with similar situations, physical conditions like tiredness or hunger, beliefs about ourselves and the world, cultural conditioning, and even the weather or time of day. Contemplative practices like analyzing the 12 links of dependent origination reveal how painful emotional patterns are sustained by networks of perceptions, interpretations, habits, and conditioning, all potentially modifiable. This traditional analysis traces how ignorance leads to mental formations, which influence consciousness, leading to name and form, mental and physical phenomena, which condition the six sense bases, and so on through contact, feeling, craving, grasping, becoming, birth, and finally, aging and death. By identifying where in this chain we can intervene, we gain multiple opportunities to transform suffering. Recognizing the interdependent nature of emotional pain liberates us from paralyzing blame directed at ourselves or others that often accompanies suffering, replacing it with compassionate understanding of the conditions that led to the current state. Rather than thinking, "I'm a failure for feeling this way," or "that person made me miserable," we recognize that countless factors have contributed to this moment of experience. This broader perspective reduces shame and isolation while opening up more constructive responses. The wisdom of interdependence teaches us that just as emotional pain arises from multiple conditions, its dissolution occurs through transforming these same conditions. This means we have many potential entry points for working with suffering rather than a single approach. On difficult days, we might focus on physical factors like rest and nutrition. At other times, we might work with thought patterns or environmental changes. The interdependent nature of experience offers multiple paths toward greater ease. Modern neuroscience confirms this Buddhist perspective, demonstrating how complex brain networks, influenced by genetics, past experiences, current environment, and intentional practices, co-create our emotional experiences. What we experience as a single emotion like anxiety actually involves interactions between the amygdala, prefrontal cortex, hippocampus, and other brain regions, along with bodily systems like the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis that regulates stress hormones. This complexity means we can influence our emotional states through multiple avenues. Understanding interdependence helps explain why emotional patterns can seem so persistent, yet can also change suddenly when conditions shift. Depression that seemed immovable might lift significantly after addressing sleep patterns, changing a living situation, or practicing compassion meditation consistently. The interdependent nature of emotions means they're neither random nor permanently fixed. They're responsive to changing conditions, which gives us agency without expecting complete control. For those dealing with emotional aspects of physical pain, the principle of interdependence offers particularly valuable insights. The experience of pain involves not just physical sensations, but their interaction with thoughts. This means something is seriously wrong. Emotions, I'm afraid this will never end. Memories of similar experiences, cultural attitudes about pain, and even others' responses to our suffering. By recognizing these multiple factors, we can address those most accessible to change, even when the physical sensation itself remains challenging. The Buddha offered a practical metaphor for working with interdependent conditions. He described a farmer who wishes to grow a crop, needing to understand all the factors involved: quality of seeds, soil conditions, appropriate watering, protection from pests, and suitable climate. Similarly, to transform emotional suffering, we need to understand the various conditions that support well-being, ethical actions that prevent regret, mindfulness practices that clarify perception, compassion that opens the heart, wisdom that sees through misperceptions, and supportive relationships that sustain practice. When applied to chronic emotional challenges like anxiety disorders or recurring depression, the interdependence perspective helps prevent both fatalistic thinking, "this is just how I am," and unrealistic expectations for immediate transformation. We recognize that patterns established over years involve multiple levels of conditioning that take time to shift, while also understanding that consistent work with even one or two accessible conditions can gradually influence the entire system in positive directions. The practical application of interdependence often begins with mapping the conditions that contribute to particular emotional patterns. When anxiety arises, for instance, you might investigate: what thoughts typically precede it? What physical states make you more vulnerable? What environments or relationships tend to trigger it? What beliefs sustain it? This detailed understanding reveals multiple points where you can intervene, creating a customized approach to your specific emotional patterns. This interdependent approach also helps explain why standard solutions don't work equally well for everyone. The advice to just meditate or think positive fails to recognize the complex, unique combination of factors creating each person's emotional suffering. Understanding interdependence encourages an individualized, flexible approach that addresses the specific conditions most relevant to your situation rather than applying one-size-fits-all solutions. For working with emotional suffering, interdependence teaches a middle path between two common extremes: taking complete personal responsibility for our emotions, ignoring external conditions and social factors, or blaming everything on external circumstances, ignoring our own role in perpetuating patterns. The truth lies in recognizing both internal and external factors without getting caught in blame in either direction. This balanced perspective supports effective action without unnecessary guilt or helplessness. By understanding the interdependent nature of emotional pain, we develop a more fluid and less rigid relationship with our experiences. We see emotional states not as solid entities, my depression, my anxiety, but as flowing processes responding to changing conditions. This perspective naturally reduces the tendency to identify with emotional states as fixed aspects of self, creating space for transformation. We're no longer defined by emotional patterns, but recognize them as conditioned phenomena that can change as conditions change. The profound understanding of interdependence doesn't just help us work with current emotional suffering, but also prevents future pain by showing us how our actions and choices create conditions for subsequent experiences. This isn't about blaming ourselves for our suffering, but recognizing our agency in influencing future conditions. By making choices that support mental well-being, maintaining ethical conduct, practicing mindfulness, cultivating healthy relationships, and developing wisdom, we create causes for greater emotional freedom and resilience going forward. The profound understanding of interdependence doesn't just help us work with current emotional suffering, but also prevents future pain by showing us how our actions and choices create conditions for subsequent experiences. This isn't about blaming ourselves for our suffering, but recognizing our agency in influencing future conditions. By making choices that support mental well-being, maintaining ethical conduct, practicing mindfulness, cultivating healthy relationships, and developing wisdom, we create causes for greater emotional freedom and resilience going forward. The practice of non-attachment, nekama, to free yourself from suffering, understanding the interconnected nature of our suffering naturally leads us to examine how attachment intensifies our pain. The Buddhist practice of non-attachment, or nekama in Pali, offers a direct path to freedom by identifying and gradually releasing the multiple levels of attachment that make our suffering so much worse. This practice addresses one of the fundamental causes of pain identified by the Buddha, our tendency to cling to certain experiences while pushing others away. Non-attachment is frequently misunderstood in Western contexts. Many people assume it means not caring, becoming emotionally detached, or avoiding close relationships. Nothing could be further from the truth. Buddhist non-attachment doesn't advocate emotional coldness or disconnection from life, but rather a relationship with experience that's more free and less compulsive. It's about holding life with open hands rather than clenched fists, allowing experiences to flow naturally rather than grasping desperately at some while frantically pushing away others. This practice invites us to observe how attachment operates at different levels in our experience. We become attached to pleasant physical sensations and develop aversion toward painful ones. We cling to positive emotional states and resist negative ones. We attach to ideas about how things should be versus how they actually are. We even develop subtle attachments to our identities, including identities constructed around our suffering, I am an anxious person, or I am someone with chronic pain. Through regular contemplation, we develop the ability to distinguish between care and attachment. Care comes from love and remains engaged without demanding that things be different than they are. Attachment, by contrast, creates suffering through the demand that reality conform to our preferences. We can care deeply about our health, for instance, while releasing the attachment to specific outcomes that creates additional suffering when things don't go as planned. The practice of letting go, momentarily at first and then for increasingly longer periods, reveals the freedom inherent in a consciousness that isn't fixated on any particular experience. We discover that much of our suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our desperate attempts to control experience, demanding that pleasant sensations stay and unpleasant ones leave immediately. When we temporarily suspend this controlling tendency, even for brief moments, we taste a freedom that doesn't depend on circumstances being exactly as we prefer. Interestingly, practitioners often discover that when they cultivate non-attachment toward physical pain or emotional distress, the experience itself frequently transforms. This reveals the wisdom in the ancient paradox that freedom from suffering comes not from getting what we want, but from releasing the wanting itself. This isn't resignation, but a profound shift in relationship with experience that creates space for natural healing and change to occur. Practically speaking, how do we cultivate non-attachment? One approach involves regularly noticing the suffering that attachment creates. When you catch yourself grasping at a pleasant experience, perhaps wanting a moment of pain relief to last forever, pause and observe what happens in your body and mind. You'll likely notice tension, anxiety about the inevitable change, and inability to fully enjoy what's present because you're already worrying about its loss. This direct recognition of how attachment creates suffering motivates the gradual process of letting go. Similarly, when you notice yourself resisting an unpleasant experience, perhaps trying desperately to make pain go away through sheer mental force, observe what happens. You'll typically find that resistance creates additional tension, frustration, and mental anguish beyond the original sensation. Seeing clearly how this resistance intensifies suffering naturally inclines the mind toward a more allowing relationship with what's already present. The practice isn't about forcing yourself not to want things or pretending you don't mind when you're in pain. It's about honestly acknowledging your preferences while holding them more lightly. You might silently note, I prefer not to be in pain right now, that's natural, while also recognizing my demand that this pain not be here is creating additional suffering. This honest but balanced awareness gradually shifts your relationship with all experience, including pain. Non-attachment practice applies equally to emotional suffering. When difficult emotions arise, observe your natural tendency to either push them away or become completely identified with them. Both reactions represent forms of attachment to comfort, avoiding the emotion, or attachment to the story within the emotion, becoming lost in it. The middle path involves allowing the emotion to be present without fighting it or feeding it with additional stories. This non-attached relationship gives emotions space to move through naturally rather than becoming stuck or overwhelming. The practice extends to our attachments to beliefs and opinions, including those about our pain. Many of us develop rigid ideas about what our suffering means, what caused it, and what will help. While having working hypotheses can be useful, attachment to these views as absolute truth often prevents us from seeing new possibilities or responding creatively to changing circumstances. Non-attachment to views keeps us open to new information and approaches that might offer relief we hadn't previously considered. For those dealing with chronic conditions, attachment to how things were before illness or injury often creates tremendous suffering. We become fixated on returning to exactly how we felt or what we could do in the past, rather than working skillfully with present reality. Non-attachment practice helps us honor and learn from the past without being imprisoned by comparisons that make current challenges even more difficult. The practice also addresses our attachment to specific outcomes from treatments or practices. When we try a new medication, therapy, or meditation technique with desperate attachment to it, working exactly as we hope, we set ourselves up for additional disappointment if results don't match expectations. Non-attachment allows us to pursue healing approaches with appropriate care and effort while releasing the demanding expectation that they must work in specific ways or timeframes. Perhaps most subtly, non-attachment practice reveals our clinging to identities formed around suffering. After living with chronic pain or emotional challenges for extended periods, we sometimes unconsciously build identities around these difficulties. We become someone with anxiety or a chronic pain patient as primary self-definitions. While acknowledging real challenges, non-attachment helps us recognize that we are more than our difficulties. Our fundamental awareness remains free and undamaged regardless of changing physical or emotional states. Buddhist texts often compare non-attachment to holding something precious in an open palm rather than a closed fist. With an open palm, you can actually support and appreciate the object better, seeing it clearly and allowing it to be exactly as it is. A closed fist, grasping tightly, obscures much of what it holds and risks damaging it through excessive pressure. This image captures how non-attachment isn't about caring less, but about relating more wisely to what we value. The freedom that comes through non-attachment practice doesn't happen overnight. It develops gradually as we repeatedly notice attachment patterns and experience the relief that comes with even momentary letting go. Each time we catch ourselves grasping or pushing away and consciously release that reaction, we strengthen neural pathways that support a more open, less constricted relationship with experience. Over time, this becomes less of a deliberate practice and more our natural way of being. Number sign, mindfulness in daily life: integrating mindfulness into everyday activities. While formal meditation practices like those we've explored are essential for developing mindfulness, their full benefit comes when we integrate that awareness into our daily lives. The extension of mindfulness into everyday activities represents a crucial step in dissolving physical and emotional pain, allowing the qualities we cultivate during formal practice to permeate our entire experience. Buddhism teaches that ordinary activities like eating, walking, working, and social interaction are valuable opportunities to cultivate presence that dissolves habitual patterns of suffering. The Buddha himself emphasized that mindfulness should be practiced in all four postures: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. Standing, walking, and lying down, and during all daily activities. This comprehensive approach ensures that awareness becomes our natural state rather than something limited to formal meditation sessions. Specific practices like mindful eating not only transform ordinary moments into extraordinary experiences, but also interrupt unconscious behaviors that often perpetuate physical and emotional pain. Many of us eat on autopilot, barely tasting our food while our minds are elsewhere, perhaps worrying about the future or ruminating about the past. This disconnection from direct experience represents a common pattern that contributes to suffering in all areas of life. By bringing full attention to eating, noticing the appearance, smell, taste, and texture of food, as well as the bodily sensations of hunger and fullness, we cultivate presence that extends beyond mealtimes. We also interrupt patterns of emotional eating that many people use to avoid difficult feelings, a habit that typically creates additional physical and psychological suffering. Mindful eating reconnects us with natural hunger and satiety cues that support physical well-being while providing practice in staying present with sensory experience. The practice of mini-meditations throughout the day creates strategic pauses that prevent automatic reactions and enable more skillful responses. Taking 3 conscious breaths before meetings, difficult conversations, or when noticing pain arising serves as a reset button for awareness. These brief moments of presence, perhaps lasting only 20 or 30 seconds, interrupt the momentum of habitual patterns before they fully activate. Many practitioners find that these short practice moments actually have more immediate practical impact than longer formal sessions. The Zen concept of beginner's mind invites us to approach each moment, even familiar activities or interactions with chronic pain, as fresh, unique experiences free from the filters of past judgments and future expectations. This quality of mind naturally dissolves much of our suffering by preventing the accumulation of assumptions that typically cloud direct experience. When we think we already know exactly what our pain feels like or how a particular interaction will go, we stop paying attention to what's actually happening in this unique moment. Unlike multitasking, which fragments attention and increases stress, the Buddhist practice of one thing at a time cultivates concentrated presence that naturally dissolves the mental agitation underlying many forms of emotional suffering. Contemporary research confirms what Buddhist practitioners have known for centuries, that the mind performs better and experiences less stress when focusing on a single task rather than constantly switching attention. This focused approach also allows us to find interest and engagement in activities we might otherwise rush through on autopilot. For those dealing with physical pain, mindfulness in daily activities offers particular benefits. Ordinary movements like standing up, walking, or reaching for objects often become opportunities for increased suffering when done unconsciously. We may jerk our bodies suddenly, hold tension in areas that need relaxation, or move in ways that exacerbate existing conditions. By bringing mindful awareness to these movements, we can discover more comfortable, efficient ways of using our bodies that reduce unnecessary pain. Informal mindfulness practice also helps us notice early warning signs of emotional or physical distress before they escalate. We might become aware of subtle tension in the shoulders that precedes a headache, slight irritability that could develop into anger, or minor worry that could spiral into anxiety. Catching these signals early allows intervention before patterns fully activate, preventing much unnecessary suffering. This early awareness represents one of the most practical benefits of integrated mindfulness practice. Mindfulness in communication transforms our interactions with others, reducing a significant source of emotional pain for many people. By bringing present moment awareness to conversations, really listening rather than planning what to say next, noticing physical sensations that signal emotional reactions, and observing assumptions as they arise, we interrupt patterns that create misunderstandings and conflicts. This mindful approach to relationship doesn't guarantee agreement in all situations, but creates space for more authentic, satisfying connection. The integration of mindfulness into work activities addresses a major source of stress and suffering for many people. Whether your work involves physical labor, creative thinking, caregiving, or any other activity, bringing full attention to the task at hand transforms the experience. Work done mindfully becomes less draining and more engaging, with research showing improvements in both productivity and satisfaction. Even challenging work situations become more manageable when approached with present moment awareness rather than anxious projection or resistance. Household chores and routine activities that we typically rush through or resent become opportunities for practice when approached mindfully. Washing dishes, folding laundry, cleaning, or maintaining your living space can be transformed from burdensome obligations into occasions for cultivating presence. Many practitioners report that these ordinary activities, when done with full attention, become unexpectedly satisfying and serve as informal meditation periods throughout the day. Technology use presents both challenges and opportunities for daily mindfulness practice. Digital devices often pull us into distraction and fragmented attention, contributing to stress and disconnection from direct experience. Mindful technology use involves creating intentional boundaries around digital consumption, taking regular breaks to check in with bodily sensations, and noticing the impact of different types of content on your mental and emotional state. Even brief awareness of your posture, breathing, and mental state while using devices can prevent much technology-related suffering. The transition between activities offers a particularly valuable opportunity for mindfulness practice. The moments between ending one task and beginning another, finishing a work project before starting dinner preparation, completing a phone call before driving somewhere, typically pass in a blur of mental planning or worry. By deliberately bringing awareness to these transition points, pausing briefly to feel your body and breath before moving to the next activity, you create continuity of mindfulness throughout the day rather than isolated moments of practice. The integration of mindfulness into daily life gradually dissolves the artificial division between spiritual practice and real life, transforming every moment into an opportunity for awakening and liberation from suffering. This integrated approach recognizes that pain transformation doesn't happen only during formal meditation sessions, but through bringing the same qualities of awareness, compassion, and non-attachment to our entire life experience. With consistent practice, mindfulness becomes less something you do and more the way you naturally are, creating an ongoing relationship with experience that dissolves suffering at its roots. The integration of mindfulness into daily life gradually dissolves the artificial division between spiritual practice and real life, transforming every moment into an opportunity for awakening and liberation from suffering. This integrated approach recognizes that pain transformation doesn't happen only during formal meditation sessions, but through bringing the same qualities of awareness, compassion, and non-attachment to our entire life experience. With consistent practice, mindfulness becomes less something you do and more the way you naturally are, creating an ongoing relationship with experience that dissolves suffering at its roots. Understanding emptiness, sunyata, as a tool for transcending pain. As we deepen our mindfulness practice in daily life, we begin to notice something fascinating about our pain experiences. They aren't as solid or fixed as they first appear. This insight points toward one of Buddhism's most profound and liberating teachings, emptiness, or sunyata in Sanskrit. This concept offers a perspective that can dramatically transform our relationship with pain by revealing its ultimately empty nature, not in the sense of nothingness, but in the sense of lacking independent, inherent existence. Emptiness is often misunderstood in Western contexts, sometimes equated with nihilism or the idea that nothing matters. In reality, the Buddhist understanding of emptiness is quite different. It's about recognizing how all phenomena, including painful sensations and emotional states, exist in a dependent, relational way rather than as fixed, independent entities, far from making our experiences less real. This understanding helps us relate to them with greater flexibility and freedom. When we're in physical or emotional pain, our natural tendency is to perceive that pain as extremely solid and real, an undeniable thing that exists independently and has absolute reality. My back pain or my anxiety seems to have a concrete existence, almost like an object that has taken up residence in our body or mind. This perception of solidity and permanence makes pain feel overwhelming and inescapable, intensifying our suffering beyond the actual sensation itself. The emptiness teaching invites us to investigate this apparent solidity through direct examination. When we look closely at pain with clear, mindful awareness, an interesting thing happens. What seemed like one solid thing begins to reveal itself as a constellation of constantly changing elements with no fixed center. Physical pain, when examined closely, might break down into sensations of heat, pressure, tingling, or pulsing, none of which stay exactly the same from moment to moment. Analytical meditation on emptiness asks precise questions about our pain experience. Where exactly is this pain? Does it have definite boundaries? Does it have a particular shape, color, dot, or size? Is it really a thing at all? Or is it more like a process of changing sensations, thoughts, and emotional responses? This detailed investigation isn't meant to invalidate our experience, but to help us see it more clearly, without the additional suffering that comes from misperception. When analysed with precision, pain that seemed monolithic reveals itself as a dynamic process without centre or substance, fundamentally open and luminous in its essential nature. This doesn't mean the pain disappears on a conventional level, though sometimes intensity does decrease. But our relationship with it transforms dramatically. What felt imprisoning and overwhelming becomes more spacious and workable. We discover that even intense sensations can be held in a larger awareness that isn't defined or limited by them. Advanced practitioners from traditions like Dzogchen and Mahamudra report that when pain is viewed through the lens of emptiness, even intense discomfort can be experienced as vivid energetic movement, free from the conceptual solidification that creates additional suffering. One practitioner described it as still feeling the sensations that would conventionally be called pain, but experiencing them as simply bright, clear energy moving through space without the added layer of "this shouldn't be happening" or "this is happening to me." This perspective doesn't deny the conventional reality of pain or suggest we should ignore genuine medical conditions. On the conventional level, pain signals serve important functions, guiding us to protect injured areas or seek appropriate treatment. The emptiness understanding operates alongside conventional approaches, transforming our relationship with pain while still allowing us to take necessary practical actions to address its causes. The liberating effect of recognizing emptiness comes partly from loosening our fixed concepts about what pain means. Many of us automatically interpret pain as punishment, failure, or proof that something is terribly wrong. These interpretations often cause more suffering than the original sensation. Emptiness practice helps us recognize these conceptual overlays as just that, concepts added to experience, not inherent in the experience itself. For those dealing with emotional pain like grief, anxiety, or depression, the emptiness perspective offers particular relief from the sense that these states define who we are. When we recognize the empty nature of all phenomena, including emotional states, we see that even profound grief or anxiety exists as a flowing process of sensations, thoughts, and feelings, not as a solid entity that has become our identity. This recognition creates a profound sense of freedom even amid difficult emotions. Working with emptiness doesn't require complicated philosophical understanding. It can be approached through direct experiential inquiry. When physical or emotional pain arises, simply ask yourself, is this pain one solid thing, or is it made up of many changing elements? Does it stay exactly the same, or does it fluctuate? Where are its edges? What happens when I look for the thing I'm calling pain? These simple questions, asked with genuine curiosity, begin to loosen the perception of solidity that makes suffering so intense. The emptiness teaching also reveals something surprising about consciousness itself, the awareness in which all experiences, including pain, appear. When we look for this awareness, we find it has a similar empty quality, impossible to locate as a thing yet undeniably present as the knowing capacity in which all experiences arise. This recognition points to a dimension of freedom that remains available regardless of what content, pleasant or painful, appears within awareness. Practically speaking, emptiness practice often begins with less challenging sensations before working with intense pain. You might practice with mild discomfort, neutral bodily sensations, or even pleasant experiences, noticing their composite, changing, interdependent nature. As your understanding deepens, you can gradually apply this perspective to more challenging physical or emotional pain, discovering that the same empty, luminous nature applies to all experiences regardless of their pleasant or unpleasant quality. For skeptics, it's worth noting that modern neuroscience increasingly confirms this Buddhist understanding of experience as process rather than thing. The brain doesn't record reality like a camera, but actively constructs our experience through complex networks of neural activity that constantly change. What we experience as a stable pain sensation actually involves fluctuating patterns of nerve firing, changing attention, emotional responses, and conceptual interpretations, all happening in a dynamic, interdependent process with no fixed center. The emptiness perspective doesn't promise a pain-free life or suggest we can think our pain away through philosophical understanding. What it offers is far more valuable, a fundamental shift in how we relate to all experience, including pain. That reveals a freedom not dependent on changing external conditions. Even when pain cannot be eliminated on the conventional level, the suffering created by our misperception of it as solid and defining can be dissolved through clear seeing of its empty nature. This liberating insight into the empty nature of pain represents one of Buddhism's most profound contributions to human understanding. It doesn't replace other approaches we've explored: mindfulness, compassion, non-attachment, and daily integration, but complements them by addressing the root perceptual patterns that transform inevitable pain into unnecessary suffering. When combined with these other practices, the emptiness understanding creates a comprehensive approach to freedom that works at all levels of our experience. The application of karma in reframing painful experiences. While emptiness helps us see through the apparent solidity of our pain, the Buddhist understanding of karma offers another transformative perspective for working with suffering. The concept of karma is often misunderstood in Western contexts, frequently reduced to a simplistic notion of cosmic punishment for past misdeeds. The actual Buddhist understanding is far more sophisticated and offers a powerful framework for reframing painful experiences in ways that promote healing rather than additional suffering. Karma, in its essence, represents the understanding that intentional actions generate corresponding consequences, a natural law of cause and effect that operates at multiple levels of human experience. This isn't about punishment or reward from an external judge, but about how our actions and attitudes naturally shape our reality through perfectly natural processes. Understanding karma helps dissolve the tendency to see pain as random or meaningless, revealing it as part of an ordered universe where our choices matter. This understanding doesn't mean blaming ourselves for suffering. The mature, karmic perspective cultivates responsibility without blame, recognizing that present conditions reflect complex causal interactions, not simplistic deserving of punishment. When pain arises, instead of thinking, "I'm being punished," or "this is happening because I'm a bad person," the karmic view suggests this is happening due to countless causes and conditions, some of which involved my past choices, many of which didn't. This balanced perspective prevents both excessive self-blame and total abdication of responsibility. The perspective of karma shifts our focus from the unproductive question, "Why is this happening to me?" to the transformative inquiry, "How can I respond to this situation in a way that creates less suffering for myself and others going forward?" Rather than getting lost in speculation about why pain has arisen, which often leads to rumination or self-blame, we focus on our present response, recognizing that this represents our most significant point of agency in the causal stream. In its deepest dimension, karma invites us to recognize that our conscious response to present pain, with acceptance, learning, and compassion rather than resistance, denial, or bitterness, represents the most powerful factor determining our future experience. This doesn't mean our attitude alone determines outcomes, as physical realities certainly play their role. but our relationship with whatever is happening dramatically influences both our immediate suffering and the long-term patterns we reinforce or weaken. For those dealing with chronic pain or persistent emotional challenges, the karmic perspective offers a middle way between two unhelpful extremes, seeing ourselves as helpless victims of random suffering or blaming ourselves entirely for our condition. Instead, we recognize the complex web of causes and conditions, including some of our past choices, others' actions, genetic factors, environmental influences, and societal conditions that together create our present reality. This balanced understanding supports wise action without excessive self-judgment. The karmic framework also helps explain why similar external circumstances can produce vastly different experiences for different people. Two individuals might face identical physical injuries or life challenges, yet experience dramatically different levels of suffering based on the mental habits, emotional resilience, and wisdom they've developed through past choices. This doesn't invalidate the real difficulties people face, but highlights how our internal resources significantly influence our experience of external conditions. Practically speaking, how do we apply the understanding of karma to transform our relationship with pain? One approach involves recognizing that every response to current pain creates causes for future experiences. When pain arises and we react with anger, resentment, or excessive fear, we strengthen neural and psychological patterns that make similar reactions more likely in the future. When we respond with patience, courage, or compassion, even if those qualities seem small and imperfect, we gradually establish new patterns that support greater well-being. This understanding of karma as patterns we reinforce through repeated choices offers immediate practical guidance for working with suffering. We can notice habitual reactions to pain, perhaps tension, catastrophizing, or self-pity, and recognize that each time we consciously choose a different response, we're weakening those patterns and creating conditions for greater ease in the future. This gives tremendous meaning and purpose to our moment-by-moment choices, even amid difficult circumstances. The karmic perspective also helps us work with the stories we tell about our pain. Rather than fixed narratives about being victims of circumstance or punishment, we can develop more empowering interpretations that recognize both real challenges and our capacity to respond skillfully. This pain is difficult, and I'm developing patience and courage by working with it skillfully offers a very different relationship with suffering than "this pain is ruining my life and nothing will ever change." Understanding karma doesn't mean we should avoid seeking appropriate medical treatment or practical solutions to problems. In fact, taking responsible action to address causes of suffering represents wise engagement with karmic principles. What changes is our underlying attitude. We act from balanced understanding rather than desperate grasping or bitter resentment. This mental clarity often leads to more effective action while preventing the additional suffering created by unskillful emotional reactions. The Buddhist understanding of karma also encompasses the concept of purification, the idea that working skillfully with present difficulties can actually resolve and release karmic patterns from the past. From this perspective, our pain contains opportunities for deep healing that go beyond the immediate situation. By meeting suffering with awareness, patience, and compassion rather than aversion and resistance, we not only create better conditions for the future, but also transform and release conditioning from the past. For those dealing with pain resulting from others' harmful actions, the karmic perspective offers particularly valuable insights, without denying or minimizing the real harm that occurred. This understanding helps prevent getting stuck in narratives of victimhood that perpetuate suffering. We recognize that while we didn't choose the initial harm, we do have choices about how to relate to it now. This reclaiming of agency represents a crucial step toward healing, even when complete resolution isn't immediately possible. The perspective of karma also supports self-compassion during difficult times. Rather than seeing suffering as punishment or failure, we recognize it as part of a complex causal process that involves countless factors beyond our control. This understanding naturally evokes kindness toward ourselves as we navigate challenges, knowing we're doing our best within the conditions present. This self-compassion itself represents a positive karmic action that supports healing and resilience. When fully integrated, the understanding of karma transforms painful experiences from seemingly random obstacles to meaningful opportunities for growth, healing, and the development of wisdom. This doesn't trivialize suffering or suggest pain is sent to teach us lessons, but it does recognize our remarkable human capacity to derive meaning and purpose from difficulty. By responding to pain with clarity, courage, and compassion, we not only reduce our immediate suffering, but create causes for greater freedom and well-being that extend far beyond our current situation. The Buddhist perspectives we've explored throughout these discussions, from mindfulness and compassion to understanding emptiness and karma, together offer a comprehensive approach to transforming our relationship with both physical and emotional pain. These ancient teachings, refined through centuries of practice and increasingly validated by contemporary research, provide practical methods for working with suffering at every level, from our moment-to-moment experiences to our deepest understanding of reality and meaning. While they don't promise a life without pain, they offer something even more valuable: the discovery that freedom and peace are possible regardless of external circumstances, available through our own developing awareness, compassion, and wisdom.